The night was eerily quiet along the battlements of Dragonstone. A half-moon illuminated the craggy stone beneath Melisandre's feet as she walked the outer perimeter of the castle, arms wrapped around her slender waist for warmth. The sea below surged in silver-tinted waves that lapped against the walls. Within her, the familiar warmth of Arelor's presence flickered. She had performed countless rites, witnessed secret signs in the flames. Tonight, she had come to a single inescapable truth. The wars ravaging the Seven Kingdoms would only end with an act of the impossible, a transgression against the forces of death so momentous that it would shift the balance of power and sow the seeds of peace. Despite everything she had lost, every miscalculation she had made, she believed she still had one final chance for redemption in the eyes of her Lord of Light. And for that, she needed to attempt the unthinkable. She descended a set of narrow steps hewn into the stone, carefully placing each foot in the half-darkness. Each breath she took reminded her of the price of failure. All around them, the world was unraveling. The dead were rumored to be on the march in the north. In the south, Cersei Lannister sat the Iron Throne, ruling a ruined realm through fear, while Daenerys Targaryens approached from the eastern seas, had conjured visions of fire and blood in the eyes of those who remembered the last Targaryen to wage war. Melisandre closed her eyes and pressed her palm lightly to the cool stone wall beside her. "Show me," she murmured under her breath, as though the ancient fortress walls might reveal the path forward. She had glimpsed a shape in the flames, the slender figure of a man in gleaming armor, a man with silver-gold hair and violet eyes carrying a harp, as deftly as he had once carried a sword. Rhaegar Targaryen, the once favored prince of the realm, killed on the trident by the hammer of Robert Baratheon. It seemed improbable, insane, even sacrilegious to attempt pulling a soul from the other side after so many years. But the flames had shown her no other path. An exiled princess alone could not mend the fractures that had spread across the kingdoms. A resurrected prince, though, perhaps a legendary figure returned to life, might sway the prideful lords of Westeros. He might succeed where she had so often failed. She clung to that hope as she made her way through the winding corridors of Dragonstone, her red robes trailing behind her like smoke. She passed guards who watched her with wary eyes. They had seen her conjure illusions in the flames before, speak in strange tongues, but tonight they said nothing, only nodded in respect for the Red Woman's office. She was used to that sort of respect, tinged with fear, but it no longer comforted her. It felt hollow, much like the halls themselves after the last war council had left in pursuit of alliances. Beyond those halls, hidden behind a storeroom, she had prepared the chamber for the ritual. The air smelled of salt and tallow, and candles burned in a spiral pattern around an ancient stone slab. She had chosen this place because it was old and resonant with Valyrian lore, with Targaryen energies if one believed in such. Banners once flown by the Targaryens still hung, dusty and moth-eaten, from the high ceiling. They showed the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, black upon a field of red. She paused at the threshold. Lying on the slab was the object that might make this resurrection possible. A small dragon-bone box, discovered in a hidden vault of Dragonstone. It was rumored to contain relics of Rhaegar, hair strands taken from his childhood brush, a ring he once wore, pieces of parchment rumored to contain his own words. Melisandre had gathered them carefully, uncertain of how best to channel her power, but trusting in her god's guidance. If this was truly destined, if Rhaegar's soul was meant to return, then his remnants would be the conduit she required. She began the ritual at midnight, chanting the prayers to Rhaelor, the Lord of Light who sets shadows moving and banishes darkness. She kindled the candles one by one, each tiny flame dancing in the draught as though possessed. And in her mind's eye, she saw the man she had glimpsed in the fires so many times, a tall prince with thoughtful eyes, stoic but gentle, gifted not merely in battle but in song. She could almost hear the soft strum of his harp, the notes drifting like ghosts through centuries of regret and longing. She touched the ring in the dragon-bone box, feeling the coldness of metal that once was pressed around a prince's finger. Her chants rose to a crescendo, her voice echoing off the walls in a language older than the Andal kingdoms, older than the Targaryen conquest. "Erlor, O great Lord of Light, guide us through the darkness. Raise the warrior of prophecy to guide the living. I beg of you, bring forth the prince that was promised." The words tasted of desperation on her lips. She pressed a blade to her hand and let her blood dribble over the ring, spattering on the stone slab. In the candlelit gloom, scarlet droplets splashed in obscene patterns, forming shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. For a time, nothing happened. Only the slow drip of blood and the flicker of candlelight accompanied her fervent whispers. She felt her faith waver, as it had the night she tried to rekindle another hero's life in the north. Yet, after endless moments of stillness, a distant rush of heat flared in her chest, just behind the sternum, and the blood markings on the stone table began to glow as if lit from within. The ring trembled, rattling in the dragonbone box. She could not tell if this was real or an illusion cast by the dancing shadows. She stilled her breath, pressing both palms onto the stone, chanting the final words of the incantation. The warmth spread like an underground flame, brightening the chamber until she dared not look at the center of that pulsating glow. She felt her heart quiver, uncertain if she was about to collapse or be consumed by the energies. Then all at once, the light vanished. The candles still burned, but dimmer now. And on the slab lay a figure that had not been there before, a naked man with silver gold hair, his skin as pale as moonlight, chest unmoving. Melisandre gasped, taking several steps forward. She could see the cut of his jaw, the curve of his cheekbone, and the strong lines of his shoulders. He was exactly as the legends had described, Rhaegar Targaryen in his youth, unscarred, untouched by the years that should have ravaged him. In trembling awe, she knelt and pressed a hand to his chest. It was neither warm nor cold, but disturbingly inert. Despair threatened to break her. Had her incantation only conjured a lifeless vessel? Then she felt it, a faint beat. His eyes flew open, violet in the candlelight, and he drew in a sharp, ragged breath. Melisandre let out a cry, half wonder, half fright. The man on the slab coughed hard as though his lungs were drawing air for the first time in decades. She clasped his shoulder. A heartbeat thrummed beneath her fingers. Rhaegar Targaryen had returned to the world of the living. He gasped, eyes darting about in alarm. "Where?" he choked, voice raspy with disuse. "Where am I?" Every syllable trembled. Slowly, he attempted to sit up, arms trembling with weakness, as if unfamiliar with the demands of living flesh. "You are in Dragonstone," Melisandre murmured, voice thick with reverence and relief. "Be calm, my prince. The Lord of Light has granted you a second life." He looked at her then, confusion and memory at war in his eyes. Without warning, he winced, as though haunted by phantom pains, echoes of a warhammer striking his chest near the green-blue waters of the Trident. He brought a hand to his sternum as if expecting to find a gaping wound. There was none, only pristine skin. But the shock of the memory momentarily overwhelmed him. He trembled, blinking rapidly. "I died," he managed, so quietly that Melisandre had to lean in. "I died on the Trident. I felt the water, heard the screams. Elia, my children." His breath hitched on that last word, and she could see a sudden wave of anguish pass over him. Melisandre felt the sting of tears behind her eyes. She fought them back. She had witnessed these moments before, with others who had been pulled from the darkness, but never one who had been gone so long, nor one whose death had shaped the entire history of the realm. "Yes," she said gently. "You died, but you have been called back because the realm needs you, Prince Rhaegar. The living need you." And thus began the first of many nights of confusion and rediscovery. Word of Rhaegar's resurrection was kept secret. Melisandre confided in only a few trusted individuals on Dragonstone, loyal to the memory of House Targaryen. She arranged for the prince to receive food, clothes, and privacy. In those initial days, he spent hours staring at the sea, as if trying to piece together a past that refused to remain in the grave. Sometimes Melisandre found him trembling with grief, whispering the names of those he had lost. Other times he roamed the halls of Dragonstone like a sleepless specter, gazing upon Targaryen tapestries and half-destroyed relics from a bygone era. Though she possessed no illusions about the magnitude of what she had done, Melisandre began to wonder if the cost of summoning back Rhaegar Targaryen might be a heavier burden than she or the realm could bear. For there were truths that must be told to him, that his son, Aegon, was believed murdered as an infant, that his sister, Daenerys, had grown to become a mighty queen in exile, that the great houses of Westeros had shattered into warring factions, that the dead threatened from the north, and that the living had little reason to trust the Targaryen name. Oh. She knew that these revelations would break his heart a second time. But he had to know. She had not brought him back merely to wander halls of memory. He was needed in the present to bridge the gaps that threatened to destroy the realm. It was a pale dawn when she finally told him. She found him at the far end of a deserted courtyard in Dragonstone, running his fingertips over the carved scale-like patterns in the wall. He turned to face her, wearing a simple tunic of gray wool, his once princely garments a distant memory. Though he looked very much as he had at the height of his youth, there was a heaviness in his gaze, a sorrow that betrayed knowledge of the finality of death. She told him about Robert's rebellion, about the sacking of King's Landing, the murder of Aelia and their children, the flight of Viserys and infant Daenerys across the narrow sea, the imprisonment and death of his father, the mad King Aerys, and eventually the ascension of Robert Baratheon to the Iron Throne. He listened silently, his eyes bleak, hands clenching. He asked few questions, as if each detail was a lash upon his back. When Melisandre spoke of the murders of his children, she saw him shut his eyes tight, tears seeping through. It was as though he was grappling with the urge to scream, cry, or collapse. But all he managed was a haunted nod. She pressed on, telling him of the War of the Five Kings and how, in the wake of Robert Baratheon's death, the realm had fractured further, with Joffrey's cruelty, the betrayal of Robb Stark's cause, and the eventual battles that drew Daenerys Targaryen from across the sea with her dragons. Only near the end did she mention the threat of the White Walkers and the army of the dead. He finally spoke in a hoarse whisper. "Gods have mercy. Do you mean to say that the dead themselves rise in the north?" She nodded. "Yes, I have seen it with my own eyes. The threat is real, and it dwarfs all mortal quarrels. Our only hope lies in unity, my prince. You may be our best chance." He gazed at her in disbelief. "How? The lords of Westeros believed me dead for so many years, for decades. Most probably believed me unworthy of my birthright. And even if they could acknowledge me, the realm has changed beyond recognition." He turned away to hide the tears that threatened to fall. "I have lost everything. My father, Aelia, our children, all gone. I'm nothing but a whisper from the grave." Melisandre placed a hand upon his shoulder. "Perhaps a whisper is exactly what the realm needs. The living cry for peace. The lords and ladies fight out of fear and pride. But if the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, if the prince that was promised, returns from the dead to unite them, perhaps they will listen. And your sister, Daenerys Targaryen, is here in Westeros now. She too wants the throne. She has the might of dragons. If you stand beside her, can you imagine how the lords would tremble, or kneel?" He stilled at the mention of Daenerys. He had died before her birth, but an echo of paternal protectiveness rose in him when he heard her name. That she was grown, that she was powerful, that she was close. "Daenerys," he said softly, testing the name. "Viserys too." Melisandre's eyes flickered with sorrow. "Viserys was slain in Essos years ago. He was not like you. Some say madness is in your bloodline, but from what I know, he displayed cruelty and arrogance. He provoked a warlord and paid with his life. Yet Daenerys remains. They call her the Mother of Dragons." "Nay." A flicker of longing passed across his face. "Dragons," he echoed. "Father was obsessed with them. I studied them too. Old Valyria, the histories? We truly have dragons again?" She offered a small smile. "Yes. 3 adults, full-grown and fearsome. She arrived not long ago, seeking alliances to claim the throne. But she struggles, for Westeros is not the land she left, nor the one you knew. And there is another. The king in the north, Jon Snow. Natiraniar, Edazansar." The name was not unfamiliar to him. Rhaegar had known many Starks in his time, had fought at the Trident against Ned Stark's forces. "A Stark? A king?" he said with a note of curiosity. "Does House Stark yet persist in these times?" Melisandre hesitated, uncertain whether to reveal all she knew of Jon Snow's parentage. The revelations about Lyanna Stark, about the Tower of Joy, about how Jon Snow was actually Rhaegar's own child. These weighed heavily on her heart. The realm was not yet prepared for that knowledge. Perhaps Rhaegar himself was not prepared to learn that in the midst of heartbreak and war, his line continued, hidden in the north. Yes, she answered slowly. House Stark remains, though battered. Jon Snow was named king in the north by his bannermen, but he is not truly Ned Stark's son. He was born a bastard. But the north loves him, and he has proven himself worthy of command. His chief concern is the threat beyond the wall. Rhaegar's gaze clouded with a tangle of emotions. He had been raised to believe in honor, in the inevitability of duty. That the northern lords would accept a man rumored to be Ned Stark's bastard as their king surprised him. It seemed times had indeed changed. And you believe this king in the north will come if I call? Melisandre's mouth curled into a fragile smile. He has already come once for an alliance, for he sought Dragonglass to fight the undead. He is open to reason, if reason is honest. If he knew you lived, if you, a Targaryen prince, summoned him, he might listen. And beyond him, there are others. Tyrion Lannister, once accused of killing his own father, now hand to Daenerys Targaryen. Lords of the Vale, of the Reach, and the Riverlands, they are all searching for hope or advantage. If you appear before them, Prince Rhaegar, resurrected by the Lord of Light, you might unite them in a cause for peace. Nezuanei. A muscle in his jaw flexed as he considered the enormity of the task. With so many dead, so many years wasted, the realm in tatters, could he mend what had been shattered? He had devoted his life to prophecy once, believing that a child of his blood might be the prince that was promised. He had spurred a rebellion that tore the realm apart. To step forward now, after all that tragedy, after everything had changed, demanded more than he could reckon. But a spark glimmered in his eyes. For the living, he murmured, I can try. So began the whispers that would change the course of the war. Carefully, Melisandre had letters penned, sealed with an old Targaryen signet ring. She was never explicit in these letters, never naming Rhaegar outright. Instead, the letters bore a cryptic invitation to attend a council for peace at Dragonstone, or risk the wrath of a power beyond imagining. Recipients included Jon Snow, the king in the north, Daenerys Targaryen, the would-be queen, and even Queen Cersei Lannister in King's Landing, among other lords who still held sway over their fractured corners of Westeros. Each letter hinted that a Targaryen prince would mediate, but offered no further detail. One by one, the ravens took flight. Upon delivering these letters, the realm was abuzz. Tyrion Lannister read the invitation and furrowed his brow. A Targaryen prince? He mused to Daenerys. We all believed Viserys dead, and no other Targaryen princes are known to live. Could it be a trap set by Cersei? Or some red sorcery from that priestess Melisandre? Daenerys felt an odd stirring. She had heard rumors of Melisandre's miraculous feats, including resurrecting men from death. If so, perhaps there was something more at play. Jon Snow received his letter in Winterfell, and found himself exchanging startled glances with his sister Sansa, who read the words in silence and said, We must go. If they promise an alliance against the Night King, we need all the help we can get. Near now. Far to the south, in the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister listened to her council read out the invitation. A Targaryen prince? Nonsense. Daenerys was the last Targaryen I was aware of, aside from her dead brother. But if they wish to propose a peace, perhaps it's time for strategy. We will attend and see how we might twist it to our advantage. Thus the stage was set for a meeting the likes of which Westeros had never seen. Lords and ladies, queens and kings, all converged on Dragonstone under banners of wary truce. They came by ship or by horseback, each harboring suspicions but also glimmers of cautious hope. Melisandre personally greeted them upon arrival, leading them into the castle's great hall, where polished obsidian floors reflected the flicker of candlelight. The hush in the room was palpable, as though all present sensed the ghostly presence of centuries of Targaryens. Daenerys Targaryen arrived with her entourage, Tyrion Lannister, Melisandre, and Grey Worm. Jon Snow came escorted by Davos Seaworth and several northern lords, Sansa choosing to remain in Winterfell to guard against treachery. Queen Cersei, to everyone's surprise, had also come in person, accompanied by the towering Sir Gregor Clegane, and a retinue of Lannister guards. They stood in a circle of uneasy stares and guarded words. Tyrion eyed Cersei warily, while Cersei glowered at Daenerys. Jon Snow's gray eyes flicked between them all, seeking a sign of sincerity. Then Melisandre raised her voice, calling for silence. "We are gathered here on a night of wonders. The realm is wounded. We can either heal it or let it die. The walking dead threaten from the north, and we bicker over thrones." She moved aside, gesturing to a shadowed archway behind her. "Yet the Lord of Light has granted us a gift, someone who may unite us all." The hush became absolute. Slowly the figure stepped from the darkness, dressed in black and red, bearing himself with regal grace. Silver gold hair fell to his shoulders in soft waves, and his face seemed lit from within by a solemn intensity. He paused, scanning the array of powerful lords and ladies before him. His violet eyes lingered on Daenerys, who stared in open shock, as though seeing an apparition. Tyrion dropped his wine goblet in astonishment. Jon Snow felt an inexplicable shiver run through him, as though the very marrow of his bones recognized something. Cersei's mouth parted in shock, though her eyes quickly narrowed in suspicion. Rhaegar Targaryen spoke, his voice low but resonant with the authority of a once prince. "My lords," he began, "my ladies. I am Rhaegar, Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, son of Aerys Targaryen, fallen on the trident many years past. I have been brought back by the grace of the Lord of Light. I do not know why I was chosen, perhaps for my sins, perhaps for my destiny. But I stand before you, living flesh, to ask that we end the cycle of bloodshed. A greater threat looms beyond our petty quarrels, and we must stand united if any of us are to survive." A stunned silence followed. Daenerys stepped forward first, her lips trembling. She had only ever known Rhaegar through stories told by her brother Viserys, or whispered accounts from those who remembered him as a tragic figure. To see him here, alive, undone every assumption she had about her family's lost past. How can this be?" she whispered. Rhaegar inclined his head. "I can offer you only the word of those who have known my face in the past, or the evidence of letters, artifacts, or the signet ring I wear. But I suspect your heart may already know the truth, Daenerys. You are my sister. I was told you survived. 3 heads of the dragon, they always said. The 3 living Targaryens? They always said." She stared into his eyes, tears gathering. Then it's true." With sudden emotion, she rushed forward and embraced him. The lords and ladies present looked on, some with surprise, others with cynicism. Queen Cersei's lips twisted in a faint sneer, though behind her eyes there was a flicker of fear or uncertainty. Jon Snow watched, arms folded, brow furrowed. Something in him stirred, a bond he could not name, as if the blood in his veins recognized kinship. But how could that be? He was Ned Stark's son, or so he believed, and yet this man's presence filled him with a powerful sense of connection. Tyrion finally found his tongue. "Even if you are who you say you are, and the resemblance is striking, what now? The realm is on the brink of annihilation. The White Walkers march from the north. The Iron Throne is contested. Armies are scattered." Rhaegar released Daenerys from their embrace, turning a solemn gaze toward the impight. "I propose a truce," he said firmly. "Between all claimants to the throne, all lords of the great houses, all who have a stake in the future. We must unite our forces to stop the undead threat. Without unity, none of us will survive. I have seen the horrors of war firsthand, in life and in death. I wish to spare our people any further suffering." "Nen." Cersei stepped forward then, her rich gown trailing across the stone floor. She regarded Rhaegar with something akin to scornful curiosity. "So you claim to be the rightful king of Westeros?" she asked. "Yet you do not demand the crown. You demand a truce. Are we to believe your intentions are so noble?" Rhaegar met her gaze without blinking. "I did not come back to claim a throne stained with the blood of innocence. I fought Robert Baratheon and I lost. The cost was unspeakable, not merely for me and my family, but for the entire realm. If I could undo the suffering my war unleashed, I would. But all I can do now is ensure it does not continue. I will not begin my second life by causing more bloodshed." Should I claim the throne afterward if the realm demands it, then so be it. But first and foremost, I seek peace. No. Cersei's eyes narrowed. The mountain loomed behind her, silent in his gilded armor. Yet something in Rhaegar's earnestness unnerved her. She sensed this would rouse sympathy among the lords, perhaps overshadowing her own precarious claim. The realm had grown tired of war. If Rhaegar Targaryen was indeed here, resurrected, many might rally to him. But she did not speak further. Not yet. Jon Snow spoke at last, stepping forward, tension in every muscle. Peace is essential, but so is focus. The White Walkers will soon cross the wall if they haven't already. We need to gather forces at Winterfell, arm ourselves with dragonglass, and prepare for a fight unlike any in living memory. If you can put an end to the squabbling in the south, I welcome it. We need every blade. No. Rhaegar inclined his head to the young man who called himself the king in the north. Then let us all vow it. No army shall draw steel against each other until the threat in the north is destroyed. We will march north as one, under a unified command. If that means you, Jon Snow, lead the combined armies, or if Daenerys does, or even if I must, so be it. But let us bury our hatreds for now. Daenerys stepped forward, regal in her posture, though her voice trembled with emotion as she still reeled from the shock of meeting her long-dead brother. I will pledge my forces, my dragons, to fight the army of the dead. I have seen them with my own eyes. I know what they can do. She paused, exhaling a trembling breath. But I must ask, brother, what do you know of the prophecy of the prince that was promised? A faint smile touched Rhaegar's lips, though it did not reach his eyes. I devoted my life to studying that prophecy. I believed my child would be the one. But prophecy can be fickle, and it can blind us to what is truly important. Perhaps the prince that was promised isn't a single person but an idea, a lineage, or a coalition that saves the realm. I know not. But I swear to you I will fight for the living, no matter whose name the prophecy exalts. Or. A stillness descended, and in that moment an accord seemed within reach. If even the resurrected Rhaegar Targaryen spoke of unity over ambition, then perhaps the lords and ladies could follow. Tyrion looked around, surprised by the flickers of acceptance in many faces. Cersei, however, remained aloof. Her mouth tightened and she said, "We shall consider this proposition. Peace is easily spoken but rarely kept. Still, I will not stand by and watch the dead destroy the world. The crown will commit forces under one condition. Once the threat is dealt with, the question of succession will be addressed in King's Landing. There will be no illusions about who ultimately holds power." Jon Snow bristled at her tone, but Rhaegar lifted a hand, halting any argument. "Then let us seal this temporary alliance. My queen, my sister, and I will hold you to your word. Perhaps all of Westeros will see that House Lannister can do more than shed blood." Now, Cersei gave a tight nod, though she refused to meet his eyes for long. "We shall see." With that, the first step toward peace was taken, though the tensions in the hall remained as thick as smoke. The gathered lords and ladies dispersed in uneasy groups, escorted to chambers to rest, or back to their ships if they intended to depart for the north soon. Plans were made for a mass mobilization toward Winterfell, provisions to be gathered, ravens dispatched to coordinate. In the swirl of these preparations, Rhaegar found himself alone in one of Dragonstow's lesser-known corridors, gazing at the flickering torches on the walls, struggling with the weight of the moment. He had just been thrust into the middle of a war for humanity's survival, and also into the question of who should rule if they succeeded. As if that were not enough, memories of Elia, of his slain children, and of Lyanna Stark tormented him. Guilt weighed like an anchor on his soul. He did not hear the footsteps until they were close behind him. When he turned, he found himself face to face with Jon Snow. The Northern King studied him with a conflicted expression, as though searching for answers he could barely name. "My lord," he began haltingly, "I apologize for disturbing you. But I needed to speak." Rhaegar studied the younger man's face. Black hair, gray eyes, a solemnity beyond his years. Something about him stirred old memories of Lyanna. "There is no need for apology," he replied gently. "You may speak freely." Jon swallowed, glancing away, as though uncertain how to phrase what he felt. "I've been told," Stories about you. My father, and Stark, fought against you at the Trident. I always believed you were the enemy, that you had abducted his sister Lyanna and started the war. But then I heard other accounts, that you were a good man, a prince who cared for his people, who loved music and prophecy. I don't know what to believe." Rhaegar listened, heart pounding. His mind conjured an image of Lyanna Stark with her wildflowers, her haunting smile, her fearless spirit. "I wish I could tell you that I was blameless. But I was swept away by visions, by love, by the illusions of prophecy. If I could go back and change what happened, I would. War is never simple. Your father, Ned Stark, was an honorable man, even from what little I knew. I never wanted my conflict with Robert to stain House Stark or any other house." He hesitated, searching Jon's eyes. "You have your father's bearing in some ways, but you are also different." Jon studied him, breathing softly. "I am not sure who I am anymore in truth," he admitted. "I used to think I was a bastard, that my father was Ned Stark. Then I learned I might have Targaryen blood, though it was never proven to me beyond rumor. But I feel something. When I see dragons, I don't feel fear as much as all." He paused, inwardly wrestling with whether he should share all that was in his heart. "I've come to trust Daenerys. She's saved me, and if you stand beside her, perhaps we can truly unite the realm." Something in Rhaegar's soul clenched. He did not yet know the entire truth, that Jon was his son by Lyanna. But he sensed a bond. He placed a hand on Jon's shoulder, a firm but gentle grip. "You have the look of a man who bears great burdens on his shoulders. Let us share the load in the days to come. Perhaps in the midst of war, we can discover who we truly are." Jon inhaled shakily, nodding. Though he did not speak the words out loud, in that moment he felt an inexplicable wave of sorrow that this man before him had missed so much of life, and had left so many questions. He wondered if, after the war, he might find answers that would reorder his entire sense of self. But now was not the time. The dead were coming, and time was short. Rhaegar and Jon parted ways. Over the next days, alliances were forged, the quarreling factions cautious but compelled by necessity. Ships carried soldiers north, from the Vale to the Reach, from Dorne, despite old grudges, to the Iron Islands. Men and women came to support the war effort. Daenerys soared above them on Drogon, scanning the horizon for any threat. Cersei, bitter and distrustful, traveled with her own retinue, though many whispered that she might betray them at the first opportunity if it served her advantage. Still, the unprecedented sight of Lannister knights marching alongside Stark bannermen and Targaryen Unsullied spoke of how dire the stakes had become. Eventually, the combined forces arrived at Winterfell, dark stone walls looming against a gray sky heavy with the promise of snow. The northern air bit at Rhaegar's cheeks, reminding him forcibly of how different life was beyond the sunny Southlands. He found himself walking the courtyard, receiving uncertain gazes from northern lords, who remembered him only as the ghost of a war that cost them their sons and fathers. But Jon Snow was by his side, and Sansa Stark too. Their acceptance went a long way toward stilling the tongues of those who would shout traitor. Rhaegar turned to Sansa, who was regal in her own right, her hair the color of autumn leaves, her eyes keen. "Lady Stark," he said softly, "your father was a great man. I am sorry for the injustices my family and I caused House Stark. I hope, in fighting beside you, I can offer some small measure of amends." Sansa regarded him intently, a flicker of pain in her gaze. "We have all lost family, Prince Rhaegar. I have no love for the Lannisters, but here we stand, ready to fight beside them if it means saving the living. If that is possible, then perhaps House Stark can forgive House Targaryen as well." She paused, lowering her voice. "We have bigger worries than old grudges." He nodded, relieved by her response. In truth, he yearned for forgiveness, though he knew he could never truly atone for the blood spilled decades ago. War, fate, the tides of prophecy, they had all played a role, yet here he was, alive, given a chance to do something right. He would not squander it. Winter came in full force, storms of whirling snow obscuring the sky. In the gloom, the armies dug in, reinforcing the walls and forging weapons of dragonglass. Daenerys dragons circled overhead, vigilant. Rhaegar found purpose in helping coordinate. Drawing on his old training, he inspected battalions, consulted with knights who had once revered him in whispered tales of the last good Targaryen prince, and advised Jon on defensive formations. Sometimes he caught Cersei studying him from a distance, her expression unreadable, as though calculating how best to handle this resurrected rival. Tyrion busied himself with logistical matters, ensuring the allied forces would not starve or freeze before the battle began. Then the day arrived when the horns sounded from the watchtowers. The army of the dead had been sighted. A hush descended over Winterfell's defenders as they watched, from battlements and parapets, a legion of white-faced wights shambling through the snow. Among them strode White Walkers with frost-bound weapons. Above them loomed the monstrous shape of an undead dragon, reanimated from the corpse of Viserion, one of Daenerys' beloved children. A silent horror, unstoppable, commanded by the Night King. The defenders of Winterfell braced themselves. Rhaegar stood on the ramparts beside Jon and Daenerys, garbed in dragon-black armor that bore the three-headed dragon sigil. A flicker of recollection touched him. The last time he had worn such armor was on the Trident, and that memory ended with his death. Yet here he was, given a second chance. He turned to Daenerys, seeing the turmoil in her eyes as she beheld the undead dragon overhead. He reached for her hand, a gesture of solidarity. Jon placed a gloved hand on Daenerys' other shoulder. Together, the three Targaryens, unknowingly father, aunt, and son, shared one breath of determination before the storm of battle broke. Chaos erupted as the whites poured forward. Arrows of dragon glass were loosed by the thousands, finding their marks in dead flesh. Soldiers armed with spears and axes braced for the onslaught. Daenerys and Rhaegar mounted two of the living dragons, she on Drogon, he on Rhaegal. The creature beneath him roared, uncertain at the new rider, but somehow, whether by Targaryen blood or divine fate, it allowed him to take the reins. Jon, despite his own Targaryen blood, remained on the ground to command the defense, unwilling to separate from his men or overshadow Daenerys' authority as a dragon rider. High above the battlefield, Rhaegar felt the rush of cold wind whipping his hair as Rhaegal soared. He had never ridden a dragon in his first life. He had only studied them in dusty tomes, singing ballads of Valyria's downfall. Now the living truth of those legends roared beneath him. He guided Rhaegal in swooping arcs, unleashing gouts of flame on the masses of whites. On the other side, Daenerys did likewise with Drogon, her silver hair flaring like a banner in the wind. Below, the lines broke and reformed, men and women screaming as whites overwhelmed trenches and ramparts. The undead dragon shrieked in the sky, exchanging blasts of sickly blue fire with Drogon's living flame. At one point, Rhaegar guided Rhaegal upward, trying to flank the undead beast. He caught a glimpse of the Night King astride it, impassive, cold eyes flickering with malevolence. Fear surged through Rhaegar's veins, but he reminded himself that he had already died once. He urged Rhaegal forward, spitting fire in a torrent that crashed against the undead dragon's side. The beast reeled, hissing, but did not fall. On the ramparts, Jon Snow personally led a charge to hold the courtyard. Even Queen Cersei's forces fought bravely, the pride of Lannister steel cutting down whites left and right. Grey Worm and the Unsullied formed a disciplined line, defending the main gate. Tyrion and Sansa commanded archers from atop the battlements. It was a desperate struggle. The living threatened to be drowned by the sheer numbers of the dead. Then, from the corner of his vision, Rhaegar saw an opening. The Night King had dived low to blast a section of the wall with blue flame. If Rhaegar could just angle Rhaegal's flight, he jerked the reins, his heart pounding. The green dragon beneath him roared in response, streaking downward. Daenerys caught sight of him, but she was too far away to intercept. Rhaegal dove toward the undead dragon, unleashing another gout of emerald flame. The Night King's steed screeched in pain, battered by dragonfire. Rhaegar's heart leaped with fierce hope. The Night King locked eyes with Rhaegar, an ancient hatred swirling in that icy gaze, as though mocking the man who dared cheat death. The pale figure raised a frost-tipped spear, preparing to hurl it. Rhaegar felt a thrill of terror. He remembered hearing how the Night King had once brought down a dragon with such a weapon. If he were to die again this day, so be it, but he would not cower. He urged Rhaegal to close the distance. Dragon against undead dragon, living flame against icy oblivion. The spear flew with deadly precision, but Rhaegar twisted, a savage screech reverberating. The spear tore through the membrane of the dragon's wing, sending the beast lurching sideways. Rhaegar clung fiercely, his mind reeling. A swirl of snow and wind tore his vision, and suddenly they were plummeting. But Daenerys was there, Drogon roaring, diving in to slash at the undead dragon's flank, distracting the Night King. The vile spear missed its second mark. Free from the immediate threat, Rhaegar managed to steady Rhaegal enough to land heavily inside the walls of Winterfell, half crashing, half landing on a patch of churned mud. Soldiers scattered to avoid being crushed. Rhaegar leaped from the dragon's back, breathing hard. Rhaegal was wounded, limping, but still very much alive. Without hesitation, Rhaegar drew his sword, one he had named Heartsfire, and waded into the fray on foot to protect Rhaegal from the whites swarming in. All around him, chaos reigned. The living fought valiantly. Jon Snow cut down white after white, a primal fury in his eyes. Across the courtyard, Rhaegar glimpsed Queen Cersei, pale-faced, brandishing a dagger as whites closed in. Sir Gregor cleaved through them like a monstrous sentinel. Tyrion barked orders from the wall, trying to keep a line of archers coordinated. The air was thick with the stench of blood, death, and burning flesh. Then came a thunderous roar. Drogon and the undead dragon were locked in a savage mid-air clash just above the courtyard. The Night King leapt from his undead mount, his cold presence seeming to darken the sky around him. He landed atop a broken battlement, scanning the chaos for a target, seemingly unaffected by the swirl of carnage. Rhaegar pushed through the fighting, drawn by an inexorable force toward that figure of living death. Perhaps prophecy or fate demanded a confrontation. Perhaps the Night King recognized a resurrected soul. Their gazes locked across the courtyard. In the stories Rhaegar once read, the long night was ended by a hero who wielded a flaming sword, the champion of Earl lore. He did not know if he was that hero, nor if the flaming sword was metaphor or literal truth. But he felt a surge of heat in his chest, and his blade blazed to life with a sudden white flame that crackled like distant lightning. He gasped, nearly dropping it. Melisandre's voice drifted through his memory. "The Lord of Light has a purpose for you." Could this be it? He advanced, sword blazing, the glow casting dancing shadows on the ruined courtyard. The Night King watched with chilling indifference, then descended the shattered steps to meet him. At that moment, Rhaegar felt the hush of destiny around him, as if the entire world held its breath. An otherworldly cold seeped toward him, the aura of the ancient evil. He steeled himself, recalling every martial lesson, every old prophecy. Behind him, he heard Daenerys cry his name, but he did not turn. If he failed, she would burn the Night King with dragonfire, or die trying. He had to strike now. The Night King lunged, sword of ice meeting flame. The impact reverberated, sending a shockwave that knocked nearby fighters to the ground. Sparks of frost and flame danced in the air. Rhaegar staggered but held firm, pressing the attack. Each strike tested his strength. He was no longer the young man he had been, and though he carried that youthful visage, he sensed a deeper weariness in his bones. The Night King was ancient and tireless, responding with swift, merciless blows. Rhaegar parried desperately, the flaming sword arcing through the whirling snow. A sudden slash from the Night King nearly felled him. Ice scored across Rhaegar's armor, slicing a deep gouge and drawing blood. He cried out in pain, staggering back. The Night King lifted a hand, and a blast of frigid energy struck Rhaegar, sending him sprawling onto the ground. His sword clattered away, the flame extinguished by the freezing onslaught. The world spun, and Rhaegar coughed, tasting blood. The Night King approached, unhurried, raising his icy blade for the final strike. Rhaegar struggled, trying to reach for his sword, but it lay too far away. He could see it smoking on the ground, glimmering dully in the half-light. "Elia," he whispered. "Daenerys Dottie." "Jon." Then with a roar like a wounded beast, Jon Snow crashed into the Night King from the side, long claw cleaving down. The White Walker turned, blocking the blow, but it was enough to give Rhaegar a moment's reprieve. Jon fought with a fury born of desperation, his Valyrian steel sword clashing again and again against the Night King's ice. Daenerys swooped overhead, blasting a wave of fire that licked at the courtyard, scattering whites. Rhaegar crawled, ignoring the searing pain in his side, until he grasped the hilt of his own blade. He tried to summon that flame again, praying to the Lord of Light. Slowly, a thin flicker of orange engulfed the steel. He rose to one knee, panting, blood trickling from his mouth. The Night King battered Jon aside, sending him crashing into a heap of broken barrels. Ice crystallized around his limbs. Rhaegar knew he had only one chance. Summoning the last of his will, he hurled his sword with all his might. It soared in a spiral, trailing flame through the air. The Night King twisted too late. The sword struck, piercing the entity's chest. A brilliant flash of light erupted, and the Night King emitted a soundless scream, a crack spiderwebbing across his icy form. Then he shattered into 1,000 shards of frozen dust, dissolving into the wind. All across the battlefield, the whites collapsed, empty husks. The undead dragon roared one final time, then plummeted from the sky in a spiral of bone and ice, scattering the ground with its corpse. A silence fell over Winterfell, disbelieving, stunned. Rhaegar collapsed to the ground, darkness encroaching on his vision. The agony in his side flared. Dimly he felt someone gathering him up, cradling his head. He managed to blink, seeing Jon Snow's face streaked with sweat and dirt. "Hold on," Jon rasped. "We have a maester." Rhaegar exhaled a shaking breath. His lips curled in a faint, weary smile. "We did it," he murmured. "We ended it." Jon nodded, voice choking with emotion. Around them, Daenerys landed with Drogon, leaping from the saddle to kneel at Rhaegar's other side. A swirling circle of fighters, lords, and ladies formed a ring about them, the hush broken only by ragged breathing and the crackle of small fires. Daenerys pressed a hand to Rhaegar's cheek. "You're going to be fine," she whispered. "You've survived death once. You can do it again." He wanted to answer, to reassure her, but darkness consumed him. Vague impressions passed through his fading senses. He thought he felt the warmth of dragonfire, the press of hands trying to stanch his wound, the prayers of Melisandre or some other red priest. Then all went black. When Rhaegar's eyes fluttered open, he was in the great hall of Winterfell, lying on a makeshift bed of furs by the fire. Candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls. The door was guarded by 2 stark men-at-arms. Seated beside him was Daenerys, half asleep in a chair, and Melisandre stood across the room, gazing into the fire as if reading signs in the flames. Rhaegar stirred, causing Daenerys to jolt awake. Relief flooded her features. "You live," she breathed, gently taking his hand. He squeezed hers back, a small sign of life. Melisandre approached with measured steps. "I had to call upon the Lord of Light again," the Red Woman said quietly. "Your wounds were dire, but your fate is not yet sealed, Prince Rhaegar." He swallowed, voice hoarse. What of the battle?" Daenerys' smile was tinged with both relief and sorrow. "We won. The Night King is destroyed. His army collapsed. The realm is safe, for now. We paid a great cost in lives, but we did it. You did it. You did it." A wave of emotion washed over him. He closed his eyes in silent thanks. To have played a role in saving the realm, this was redemption beyond anything he thought possible. Memory returned in fragments. The blazing sword, Jon Snow's intervention, the Night King's demise. He asked, "Jon, is he?" "Alive," Melisandre interjected. "He is well, though bruised and battered. He saved you. You saved him. The living prevailed together." Rhaegar relaxed, a faint smile forming. Daenerys helped him take a sip of water, and he realized how parched he was. His body ached, but the knowledge that the long night threat was ended filled his heart with warmth. A swirl of thoughts crowded his mind. What next? The realm was saved from the undead, but the question of the Iron Throne remained. And more than that, the secrets of Jon Snow's parentage loomed on the horizon. He could sense it like a shadowed truth, waiting to be discovered. Days passed in Winterfell, which now held an atmosphere somewhere between mourning and celebration. The fields were littered with the dead from both sides, and the funeral pyres burned for days. Rhaegar gradually regained his strength, walking the walls with Daenerys, or speaking quietly with Jon. Queen Cersei lingered only long enough to confirm that the threat was truly gone, and then she and her retinue departed south, no doubt plotting her next move to maintain power. Tyrion, Grey Worm and many others stayed to bury the dead and plan for what would follow. The united armies were still restless, uncertain whether the realm's unity would shatter now that the common threat was gone. One chilly morning, Jon Snow stood in the Godswood, gazing at the heart tree's red leaves. Rhaegar approached, his footsteps soft on the snow. Jon turned, inclining his head. "My lord," he greeted. Rhaegar shook his head. "Jon, we've fought side by side. You can call me Rhaegar." He paused, taking in the quiet of the sacred grove, the faint drip of melting icicles. "I wanted to thank you for saving my life. If you hadn't intervened, I would have ended on the Night King's blade." "No." Jon's expression was sober, some deep conflict in his gray eyes. "I only repaid the debt. You made the final strike. The realm owes you more than it can say." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Jon exhaled heavily, as though grappling with a truth too large to contain. "There's something you should know," he said, his voice hushed. "Something Bran Stark told me, something I didn't fully believe until I met you, until I fought beside you." Rhaegar's brow furrowed. "Bran Stark?" Jon nodded. "He has visions or something akin to them. He said that I'm not Ned Stark's son. He said that my parents were Lyanna Stark and you. That my birth name is Aegon Targaryen." It was as if the snow-laden branches fell away in Rhaegar's mind, revealing a scorching sun of revelation. His heart pounded, and he found himself reaching out to steady himself against a nearby trunk. Could it be true? In that moment, memories of Lyanna's fierce eyes, her laughter, her pleas for him to keep her safe, flooded back. He recalled she was pregnant, yes, but the war intervened, and then he died. A child," he whispered, voice trembling. "She bore a child, and that child lived?" Jon nodded, tears in his eyes. "I lived, and Ned Stark raised me as his bastard to protect me from Robert's wrath. Lyanna died in childbirth, and you were gone on the Trident. I never knew. I lived my life thinking I was a nameless bastard." Rhaegar's chest tightened with emotion so profound it threatened to crush him. He had lost his family once. The knowledge that he had another child, that Jon was his son, hit him like a thunderbolt. "My boy," he murmured, stepping forward, tears slipping down his cheeks. "My son." They embraced in the cold hush of the Godswood, father and son both trembling. The red leaves rustled overhead, as though the old gods bore witness to this meeting. When they pulled apart, Jon's face was a mixture of relief, anxiety, and lingering sorrow. "I don't know what this means for the realm," he admitted. "Daenerys is your sister, and by rights the throne might pass to you, or to me, or to her. I never wanted the throne to begin with. I just wanted to protect the North. Now everything is complicated." Rhaegar sighed, feeling the swirl of politics encroach. "It is complicated but not impossible. You are my son, heir to the Targaryen line, if that is what you wish. But I have no desire to tear the realm apart with another war of succession. We stand at a crossroads. We can either unify under a single banner or fracture again." Jon nodded. "And Daenerys? She's risked everything to save Westeros. She is a good ruler, I believe that. And you have the love of the people now, after they saw you risk your life. They call you the hero who ended the long night." "Nyen." Rhaegar smiled sadly. "I do not want to overshadow your aunt's claim. If Daenerys wishes to rule, I will not stand in her way. But the truth of your parentage cannot be denied. You are Targaryen as well. My heart tells me that our family is meant to heal this realm, not fracture it further." The two men stood there, father and son, forging a bond out of heartbreak and hope. It was decided. They would speak with Daenerys and Tyrion, and then address the lords of Westeros together. A new peace might be possible, one that included the rightful recognition of House Targaryen, without the shadow of open war. That very evening, the great hall of Winterfell was filled once more. Wounded knights sat on benches, faces scarred by the recent battle. Northern lords, unsullied officers, and knights of the Vale and Reach gathered under torches. Daenerys presided at the high table, with Jon Snow and Rhaegar Targaryen to her right and left. Tyrion stood by, watchful, and Sansa and Arya Stark were present as well, flanking Jon. Rumors of Jon's parentage had spread in whispers, but now it would be declared openly. Rhaegar rose, his voice still somewhat frail but clear enough to command attention. He spoke of the war they had fought, the unity they had forged. Then he said, "Now we must address the future of the realm. My sister, Daenerys Targaryen, risked her life to save us all. Yet, there is another Targaryen among us, my son, born of Lyanna Stark, whose name is Aegon Targaryen, though he has long been known as Jon Snow." The lords in attendance exchanged gasps, murmurs rolling through the hall. Jon stood, the flicker of torchlight casting sharp lines across his face. He explained the truth as simply as he could, how Ned Stark had hidden his true parentage to protect him from Robert Baratheon's wrath. He declared that he did not wish for the throne, that he had only ever wanted to defend the realm, and that Daenerys was his queen. Rhaegar stepped forward to stand beside them both. "If the realm wishes a Targaryen on the throne, let it be one. But know that we stand united. We need not tear ourselves apart with claims. Daenerys is our queen, and Jon, my son, is her heir if she so decrees. If the realm calls for me to lead, I will do so, but I do not wish to overshadow either of them. My purpose was to save Westeros from the dead, and that is done." Daenerys looked at the faces of the gathered lords, then at Rhaegar, then at Jon. Emotion welled in her eyes as she spoke. "I came here to break the wheel, to end the cycle of tyranny and war. With Rhaegar by my side, and Jon as well, perhaps we can build a better future for all. I will take my rightful place on the Iron Throne, but I will do so with my family at my side, so that Westeros might know peace." Wow. The hall erupted in a curious mixture of cheers, gasps, and subdued acceptance. Many recognized the logic and saw the hope of stable rule with the Targaryen line restored and allied to the north. Others were confused or wary, uncertain how these new revelations would reshape the realm. But the mood had shifted. They had survived a cataclysm together, forging bonds deeper than old feuds. Over the following weeks, the realm slowly took stock of its battered condition. Cersei Lannister retreated to King's Landing, no doubt fuming over the revelations, but with her army's numbers severely diminished, her ability to contest the Targaryen coalition was weak. Messengers flew across the Seven Kingdoms, bearing the news. Rhaegar Targaryen was alive. Jon Snow was truly Aegon Targaryen. The army of the dead was destroyed, and Daenerys Targaryen was poised to claim the Iron Throne. A grand assembly was held in King's Landing. Lords from every corner came. They expected the typical post-war drama, but instead found themselves part of a once-in-a-generation moment. Daenerys arrived by dragon, with Rhaegar and Jon in attendance, a striking triumvirate. Amid the scorched ruins still lingering from previous conflicts, the Targaryen banners were raised once more over the Red Keep. Yet this time the approach was more diplomatic. Tyrion Lannister parleyed with wary lords of the Stormlands, the Reach, and the Westerlands, promising fair treatment. Sansa Stark helped negotiate better terms for the North. Gendry Baratheon, legitimized as Robert Baratheon's heir, was named Lord of the Stormlands, forging a symbolic bond between the old rebel line and the new Targaryen rule. Finally, the day came for the official coronation. The throne room, with its high vaulted ceiling, glistened in the midday sun streaming through shattered windows. The Iron Throne loomed at the far end, that ancient seat of power forged by the breath of Aegon the Conqueror's dragons. People from all walks of life crowded in. Lords in finery, small folk in humble clothes, soldiers bearing the new royal sigil. Daenerys walked down the aisle in a gown of black and red, her silver hair braided intricately. Behind her came Rhaegar in polished armor, and Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, wearing Stark grey and Targaryen black. The High Septon, newly appointed, raised his voice to bless the occasion. Daenerys bowed her head, and a crown of twisted Valyrian steel, shaped like dragon scales, was placed upon her head. Applause and cheers echoed through the throne room. She seated herself on the Iron Throne, taking a measured breath as she surveyed those gathered. At her left stood Rhaegar, the rightful prince long thought lost to time, and at her right stood Jon, her nephew, the newly revealed prince of House Targaryen. She raised a hand to quiet the hall. "People of Westeros," she began, her voice clear, "we have endured a nightmare. But from this day forward, let there be a new dawn. With my brother, Prince Rhaegar, and my nephew, my prince, Aegon Targaryen, I pledge to build a realm where the wheel of endless war is broken, where all are free to live without fear of tyranny or the threat of the undead." Rhaegar stepped forward, speaking quietly yet firmly. "I was brought back from death to protect the living. I have done so, and I will continue to serve. I stand in support of my queen, Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. May her reign be just and wise." Jon bowed his head. "I have lived as a bastard of the North, and now I live as a prince of the blood. But I remain the same man, sworn to defend the realm. I will stand beside my family to ensure peace and justice. Neil die." In that moment, an undeniable sense of possibility filled the throne room. The scars of war did not vanish, nor did old wounds magically heal, but for the first time in many years, there was a genuine hope that the realm could move forward together. The cheers rose, and Daenerys smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. The swirl of applause and shouting echoed through the cavernous hall as she looked to Rhaegar and Jon, her family united at last. After the coronation, the crowd spilled into the streets, where celebratory feasts were prepared. Soldiers who had once fought against each other drank ale side by side. Septi bells rang throughout King's Landing, marking the formal end of years of strife. Daenerys' dragons swept overhead, majestic but not threatening, a reminder of House Targaryen's might tempered by mercy. Yet, amid the revelry, Rhaegar slipped away to a quieter balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay. The sun was setting in a cascade of crimson and gold across the water. He leaned on the stone railing, breathing in the salt air, remembering how once he had traveled these waters en route to fight Robert Baratheon. Life had come full circle. He still felt the ache in his side from the Night King's wound. The cost of living again weighed heavily, and the memory of Elia and their children haunted him. He would never be free of regret. But perhaps, in this second life, he could make amends. He heard footsteps and turned to see Melisandre, her red robes shifting in the gentle breeze. She regarded him with her usual calm intensity. "You have done much, my prince. The long night is ended, and the realm stands on the precipice of peace. You have served the Lord of Light's purpose well." Rhaegar nodded slowly. "I suppose. I sometimes wonder if that was the sole reason I was brought back. Now that the dead are vanquished, am I just a relic? Is there more that I must do?" The red woman's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Perhaps. Prophecy is rarely so neat. I have served our lore for many years. I've learned that the god of flame and shadow is not so direct. Lives are touched, destinies converged, and sometimes the smallest gesture can tilt the balance of the world." She paused, her gaze flicking across the bay. "But your role was paramount. The realm will remember. And though I foresee difficulties ahead, mortal ambition, envy, and fear do not vanish overnight. You have begun a new chapter for the Seven Kingdoms." He exhaled, letting the evening breeze tousle his hair. "Thank you, Melisandre, for bringing me back, for guiding me. If I can serve further, I will." She touched his hand briefly, her red ruby glinting in the fading light. "Live, Prince Rhaegar. That is service enough. Live and do better than before. Bring music and light into the realm." With that, she turned and walked away, robes trailing on the stone floor. Rhaegar remained, watching the horizon until the sun sank below the water, the last crimson rays extinguished in the west. Within, the feasting would continue. Daenerys enthroned, Jon recognized, the realm forging alliances. Tomorrow would bring the labors of governing, the challenges of forging a more just society. But for now, in the hush of dusk, Rhaegar allowed himself a moment of peace. The realm he had once known was gone, replaced by a battered but resilient kingdom, eager to heal. He too had a chance at a new life, with a sister he had never known and a son he had never met. He closed his eyes and felt the sea breeze wash over him, cleansing some of the guilt from his soul. He listened, in the silence of his own mind, for the echo of his old harp. It came in the softest strain, a ghostly melody that once drove him to search for meaning in prophecy and love. Now that melody was joined by the heartbeat of a living realm, a testament that even from the ashes of war, hope could rise. So it was that the resurrected Prince of Dragonstone stood at the threshold of a new age, ready to guide Westeros toward a tomorrow that might finally break the cycle of fire and blood, and give way to the promise of peace. He closed his eyes and let the last rays of sunlight fade from his mind. When he finally turned from the balcony, the corridors of the Red Keep were quiet, their torches guttering in the draft that swept in from the sea. He felt the castle's age beneath his fingers as he ran a hand along the wall, and each stone seemed to whisper of secrets and tragedies past. He found his way to a dimly lit gallery that looked out onto the sprawling city. Lights winked far below, and the distant murmur of revelry rose in waves as small folk celebrated the end of winter's horrors and the crowning of their new queen. In the flickering gloom, a single figure stood by the arches, Jon, Aegon, gazing at the same vastness Rhaegar had just left behind. His newly discovered son appeared lost in thought, brows creased in that stark way he had, as though perpetually caught between duty and regret. Rhaegar approached carefully, the tread of his boots soft on the worn marble floor. Jon turned at the sound, offering a slight nod. "You've recovered," he said quietly, his gaze dipping to the half-healed scar that cut across Rhaegar's armor. "I'm glad. I owe my life to you and Daenerys both," Rhaegar replied, voice low so it wouldn't carry along the vaulted ceiling. "And to the Lord of Light, though I sometimes question the path of his purpose. I'm told that night in Winterfell, it was nearly the end of me again." A wry smile tugged at his mouth. "Perhaps I'm getting used to dancing at the edge of death." Jon's expression darkened, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. "I only did what anyone else would do in that battle. We all risked ourselves. You fought like I've never seen. When your sword lit with flame, for a moment, I thought I was staring at every old story come to life." Rhaegar studied the younger man in silence. Jon was Targaryen by blood, a child of prophecy by some accounts, yet he bore the honorable stamp of House Stark. There was a humility in him that Rhaegar, in his youth, might never have managed. Perhaps that was exactly what Westeros needed, not only a rightful claim but a man who did not yearn for the throne, who understood the gravity of power. He placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "We would not have won without all of us fighting together. Fire and ice, dragons and wolves, every house, every kingdom. That unity was our victory." Jon nodded and turned again to the view. The city spread out in uneven streets and hills, a geometry of rooftops that looked almost peaceful under the moonlight. "Now that the war against the dead is over, we face the living," he murmured. "Cersei's acceptance of Daenerys' rule is half-hearted at best. I can't see her fading into the background. And there are lords across Westeros who once fought the Targaryen name. They might only keep the peace so long as they fear the dragons." Rhaegar could not deny the truth. "Yes. Fear is a blade pointed at your enemies, but hold it too long, and it cuts you as well. We must be cautious. A Targaryen restoration might unify the realm if we show them a different kind of rule. Generous, fair, merciful where possible. We already have alliances in the north, the Vale, the Reach. And Dorne," he paused, drawing a breath that trembled with old grief. "I owe them much. My first wife, Elia, was their princess. Perhaps through me a new bond with Dorne can be forged." Jon's eyes flicked to him. "Have you heard from Dorne since the battle?" "Some letters. Prince Corin Martell has not openly declared for Daenerys yet, but he recognizes that the war is over, and that the Targaryens are in King's Landing." Dorne bled under the Lannisters' hand. Even if vengeance lingers, perhaps they would prefer forging a new peace. But I suspect resentment may run deep. Elia's murder is a wound that never healed for them. Neonan. They stood in silence until the hush was broken by footsteps echoing in the gallery. Daenerys emerged from the far door, hair still partly braided from the coronation ceremony, though a few locks had come loose around her face. Her expression was thoughtful, as though the day's swirl of duties had left her both buoyed and burdened. "I hoped I might find the two of you together," she said with a faint smile that brightened her features. "Tyrion is waiting in my solar for us. He says we must discuss the next steps. There's news from the Stormlands and from Dorne." They exchanged looks. Duty called. Together, they followed her through the dim corridors. Servants bowed as they passed, still marveling at the sight of Rhaegar Targaryen walking the Red Keep's halls. They entered the solar, a medium-sized room where a single massive table dominated the space, its surface carved into a map of Westeros. Tyrion stood at its edge, sipping wine. Sir Davos Seaworth was there too, hands folded behind his back, as he looked on with that earnest, steady gaze. Sansa Stark and Arya Stark had arrived in King's Landing only a day earlier, and were present as well, though Arya hovered with restless energy near the back of the room, while Sansa conversed quietly with Melisandre. The thick tension of politics mingled with the lingering relief of survival. Tyrion straightened when they arrived, setting his cup down. "Your Graces," he began, his voice carrying the same careful courtesy he used when matters were delicate. "And Prince Rhaegar." He offered the resurrected prince a respectful dip of his head. "We've received 2 ravens within the last hour. One bears the seal of Storm's End, Lord Gendry Baratheon's. The other is from Dorne." Daenerys sat in the tall-backed chair at the head of the table, though the arrangement was informal enough that Rhaegar and Jon took positions on either side, with Tyrion across from them. The rest of those present arrayed themselves as they wished, though all were intent on hearing the news. Tyrion continued, "Lord Gendry's letter conveys gratitude and acceptance of your coronation, your grace. He pledges the Stormlands to the Targaryen cause and requests we solidify an agreement on trade and shipping lanes. In essence, he's seeking a promise that the Stormlands won't be overlooked as your rule expands. As for Dorne, Prince Coran Martell wishes to open negotiations regarding Dorne's loyalty. But his words hint strongly at old wounds, mention of Princess Elia, of Oberyn Martell, and the atrocities they suffered under the Lannisters. He wants reparations. And, interestingly, he wishes to meet Prince Rhaegar in person." Aye. The flicker of Rhaegar's lashes was the only outward sign of his reaction. "He wants me specifically?" "Yes," Tyrion confirmed. "He makes that quite clear. He says that since Elia Martell was your wife, Dorne will not fully trust this new Targaryen rule until they see the prince who was lost. Perhaps they want answers, or penance, for the tragedy that befell Elia and her children. Or they might simply wish to confirm the rumors of your resurrection for themselves, to be certain there's no subterfuge." "None, Daenerys leaned forward, her eyes kindling with sympathy and concern. "Rhaegar, this is difficult for you." He raised a hand gently. "I'll do it. I understand Dorne's anger more than you might guess. My union with Elia was chosen for me by my father, but I cared for her in my own way. It shames me, all that she suffered because of my decisions. I can't undo it, but if speaking with the Martells directly might begin to mend that wound, then I must go." Sansa tilted her head thoughtfully. "It might also be a trap. The Martells have reason to hate the Lannisters, yes, but they might also hold resentment against any Targaryen for not protecting Elia. You'll need to be cautious." Arya, from her spot in the shadows, nodded in curt agreement. "Dorne is far from the north, and their ways aren't always the same as ours. They might demand blood for blood." Rhaegar took a slow breath. "If I were them, I might demand the same. Regardless, the realm won't heal without confronting these truths. I will go." Tyrion touched his chin, lips thinning as he thought. "Perhaps Sir Davos could accompany you as well as a handful of loyal knights. Sir Davos has a way of speaking plainly that might ease tensions." Davos inclined his head. "I'd be honored, Prince Rhaegar. I've never been to Dorne, but I can do my best to keep the peace." Daenerys looked uncertain, as though the idea of letting her newly returned brother wander so far from her protection unsettled her. "You'll take a few unsullied guards as well. Dorne might respect a show of strength, though we mustn't appear as if we're invading." Rhaegar nodded in acceptance. "Yes, a small retinue to show that I come in good faith, but not as some feeble supplicant." Jon crossed his arms, studying the map. "And what about the rest of us here? If a meeting in Dorne goes well, we might secure the loyalty of the entire South, leaving only the Westerlands under Lannister control. The Tyrells are gone, but the Reach is yours by conquest, though you've left most of it in the hands of the new lords you appointed." He glanced at Daenerys. "We should consider traveling the realm, letting the people see us. There's more than rumor now. There's a living Targaryen monarchy, but we need them to trust it." Daenerys smiled. "I had a thought as well. I don't wish to see King's Landing remain a ruin of old battles and cruelty. We need to rebuild. We should see to the small folk here first, Better sewers, cleaner water, distribution of food for the winter that remains. If we start with the capital, the news will spread. The Targaryens are not the second coming of the Mad King, but rulers who care for the realm's welfare. Now, Arya brushed back a strand of her dark hair, her voice soft and direct. That's a wise course, but be careful not to linger in one place too long. Cersei might still have her ways to stir trouble. Tyrion's eyes flickered with a humorless glint. My sister won't sit idle. She's likely rallying whatever remains of the Lannister forces. She might even hire mercenaries again, though the Golden Company was shattered when they faced the dragons. Still, she might find other sellswords. She has Qyburn for her dark arts, though rumor has it that man is half broken after the war. The Mountain still stands at her side, though he's more monster than man. In any case, we can't ignore her. Stan. Daenerys regarded them all, the weight of her crown heavy on her brow. Then the plan is set. Rhaegar, you'll sail to Sunspear under a banner of peace. Secure Dorne's loyalty if you can, and if not, do what it takes to prevent further bloodshed. Jon and I will remain here for a short while to stabilize King's Landing. We'll open the granaries, see that the poor aren't left to starve. Then we'll journey south to join you, or meet you halfway, depending on how your negotiations proceed. In the meantime, we'll keep an eye on Cersei. Well, they dispersed shortly thereafter, each with fresh responsibilities. Rhaegar lingered in the solar, running his fingertips along the carved edges of the wooden map tile. The kingdoms that once seemed as distant stars to him now lay directly under his influence. He was no longer a dead man on the wrong side of history. He stood at the center of its next chapter. He closed his eyes, recalling Elia's gentle smile and Oberyn Martell's fierce pride. If he were to ride to Sunspear, he would face the heartbreak of Dorne in a way he had never dared before. Yet, that heartbreak needed to be faced, if the realm was truly to mend. Sleep did not come easily that night. He dreamt of the trident, of a roaring river dyed red with blood. In the dream he heard the pounding of a warhammer, the crash of steel, and then he was drowning in warm water that smelled of copper and lilies. A voice whispered, "Lyanna's," but he could not make out the words. When he surfaced, gasping, he found himself in a dark crypt lit by a single candle. A statue of a woman with stark features loomed over him, and her eyes seemed to glow with sorrow. He awoke with a start, covered in a fine sheen of sweat, heart thudding. Dawn light crept through the window, pale and uncertain. He rose, washed, and dressed. Another day under the living sun. Another chance to shape the future. Within 2 days, the small retinue was prepared. Sir Davos, ever the steady hand, accompanied Rhaegar, along with 6 unsullied guards chosen by Grey Worm for their discipline and skill. A handful of knights from King's Landing, men who had pledged themselves to Daenerys' cause after the final battles, also joined. It was not a lavish procession, no more than 24 souls in total, but it was respectable without appearing threatening. They sailed aboard a swift galley, the Dragon's Grace, from the Blackwater Bay. Daenerys and Jon came to the docks to see them off. There were no public farewells filled with fanfare. This was delicate, not a victory march. Still, the sight of the Targaryen siblings embracing sent murmurs through the small folk on the wharf. Rhaegar briefly clasped Jon's forearm. Neither man spoke more than a few words, but the mutual respect was clear. In the back, Tyrion and Melisandre conferred over a sheaf of parchment, likely more matters of governance, while Sansa and Arya stood with calm expressions. Davos and Rhaegar stood at the prow when the ship eased away from the dock, sails snapping in the wind. The Red Keep receded, its towers diminishing against the haze. Seabirds wheeled overhead and salt spray flicked up to cool the midday heat. Rhaegar wore plain but well-tailored black leather, and carried no crown or princely finery. Even his sword was sheathed in an unadorned scabbard. He had no wish to flaunt power in the face of those who might see it as a challenge. Davos let out a measured breath. Never thought I'd find myself traveling south with a Targaryen prince who used to be dead. The world's turned upside down, hasn't it? Rhaegar allowed himself a small, wry grin. If we do our job right, perhaps we can set it upright again. But yes, it's a strange fate. In my first life, I rarely traveled by sea. We Targaryens flew or rode. Now, it's all new in a sense. Davos nodded, scanning the horizon. I'll admit, my lord, I don't know the Dornish well. I've heard they're proud, don't kneel easily, and keep their own counsel. You sure it's wise for us to come with so few men? Ness. If we arrived with an army, they'd only resent us more, Rhaegar said. Pride is everything in Dorne, and they felt wronged by the Iron Throne for too long. We must show them we come in good faith. If that means trusting them not to kill us on sight, well, so be it. The journey south was surprisingly smooth, aided by fair winds and Davos experience. After days on the water, the ship rounded the southern coast. The climate shifted. Warmer breezes carrying scents of citrus and desert blooms. Rhaegar spent hours at the rail, watching the sea darken from turquoise to deeper blue, feeling the sun burn more fiercely on his skin. The nights were mild and the stars glittered overhead in unfamiliar patterns compared to King's Landing's haze. At last, they caught sight of Sunspear's slender towers perched along the coast. The castle's spires rose like spears from the desert rock, and the walls braced a cluster of winding streets that formed the city's heart. The scene was stark and golden, the sea reflecting a scorching midday sun. Rhaegar felt his pulse quicken. He had been to Sunspear once before in his youth, but that was before war devoured everything. He stood on deck as they approached the harbor. Dornish ships swayed at anchor, sleek, dark-hulled vessels armed with scorpion ballistae. Rhaegar noted the colorful pennants bearing House Martell's red sun pierced by a golden spear. At the dock, a group awaited them, a cluster of guards wearing flowing orange robes, their faces half concealed by scarves, and near them a tall, lean man with sun-bronzed skin, dressed in a deep crimson tunic embroidered with a golden spear. That would be Prince Coran Martell. When the Dragon's Grace moored, Davos and Rhaegar disembarked first. The Unsullied followed in disciplined ranks, and behind them came the knights, all silent but watchful. Rhaegar felt the press of curious eyes from the Dornish who lined the harbor. He bowed respectfully to Coran from a few paces away, palms out to show he bore no immediate threat. "Prince Coran," he said, "I come as Rhaegar Targaryen, seeking peace with Dorne." A hush fell as Coran studied him intently. The Dornish prince had keen black eyes beneath brows that angled sharply, lending him a fierce look. His hair was cropped close, threaded with silver at the temples, and the shape of his face reminded Rhaegar of Oberyn Martell, sharp, elegant, with the promise of hidden danger. Finally, Coran inclined his head. "Rhaegar Targaryen, the man who fathered the children my cousin Elia bore, the children who were slain during the sack of King's Landing, the man we believed long dead, and now you live." "I do," Rhaegar said quietly, unable to disguise the heaviness in his words. "And I carry the weight of Elia's memory with me." Coran's lips tightened, but after a moment's silence, he motioned for them to follow. "Then come. Let us speak behind closed doors, away from the eyes of the crowd." They were led through Sunspear's winding streets, the architecture a world apart from King's Landing. Pale sandstone buildings rose in tiers, shaded by colorful awnings. The air smelled of spiced wine, cooking peppers, and the tang of the sea. Citizens peered out from doorways, their expressions curious or wary. The Martell guards escorted the company up a broad set of steps to the palace gates. Within, the courtyard was a wonder of shaded pathways and water gardens. Fountains splashed in graceful arcs, and lush greenery offered respite from the sun. Rhaegar remembered how Elia once described these gardens as her favorite place in all the world. Coran guided them to a grand hall open on one side to the water gardens. Ornamental screens of carved wood let in the warm breeze. Servants approached with chilled wine, offering cups to the visitors. The Unsullied remained standing at attention near the entrance, while Davos lingered at Rhaegar's shoulder, politely declining the wine. Coran took a seat on a low, wide bench draped with silk cushions. Around him gathered several Dornish nobles, men and women with proud bearing, sporting various sashes of red and gold. Standing at Coran's right was a striking woman with dark hair braided around her head, her features sharp. She wore a sunburst pendant that suggested a close connection to House Martell. Rhaegar sensed her watchful gaze, as if she measured his every breath. Finally, Coran spoke. "We've heard tales of your resurrection, Prince Rhaegar. Old fishermen claim the Lord of Light brought you back. The realm whispers you slew the Night King, and that your sister Daenerys now sits the Iron Throne. You come seeking our loyalty, I presume?" Rhaegar inclined his head. "I come seeking a new beginning. Dorne suffered under the Iron Throne's betrayals. Elia Martell was murdered, her children with me butchered. The blame for that crime lies with Tywin Lannister and his bannermen, men who were never properly punished in my absence. My sister, Queen Daenerys, deposed Cersei Lannister in battle, but the cost was great, and the realm has bled enough. We want peace and a united Westeros, not the subjugation of Dorne. Nedai. A ripple went through the gathered nobles. The woman with braided hair spoke next, her tone low and pointed. Peace, while the Targaryens sit the throne again, the same throne that once warred against us. Her name, Rhaegar recalled from the letter, was Lady Rhaena Martell, a cousin to Qhorin Dothraki. He nodded respectfully. Once, yes. But Dorne has a history of forging peace with Targaryens too. I recall the marriage pacts after the conquest, which brought the sun and spear beneath the dragons in alliance, not conquest. Now we hope to achieve something similar. Only with more sincerity than my father, the Mad King, ever showed. Qhorin's gaze was steady, unmoved. Dorne does not forget the sins of House Targaryen easily. Rhaegar's chest felt tight. I know. And I do not come to ask for forgetfulness, only a path to move forward. If you require reparations or special privileges in trade, let us discuss them. If you demand the heads of those who slew Elia and her children, well, Gregor Clegane is dead, as is Tywin Lannister. Justice was never truly served, but at least those monsters are gone. Now. Lady Rhaena's lips pressed together. And what of Oberyn Martell, who died in King's Landing? What of Doran Martell, who spent his life plotting for justice but never saw it come to pass? Rhaegar closed his eyes for a moment, recalling Oberyn's fiery spirit. Oberyn was my friend. I can never restore him, nor any Martell who fell. All I can offer is the future. A seat at the Queen's Council for Dorne, a say in the governance of the realm. Autonomy where it's needed, so Dorne remains distinct as it always has. Daenerys Targaryen does not seek to replicate the sins of our forefathers. Oh. Qhorin leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. You speak of atonement, yet you left Elia for another woman. Some might say your actions sowed the seeds of Robert's rebellion. All these deaths, Elia's, her children's, began with your choice to bring Lyanna Stark south. There it was, the unspoken wound of Rhaegar's guilt. He lowered his head. I cannot deny my failings. I believed in prophecy, in the union of ice and fire. Perhaps it was all madness. I loved Lyanna, but I never meant to dishonor Elia. I took steps to ensure her protection, or so I thought, but I failed. But would that truly satisfy you? I will. But would that truly satisfy you? Silence stretched for several moments. Davos shifted beside Rhaegar, ready to intervene if matters soured. The Dornish nobles exchanged looks. Finally, Qhorin gave a slow nod. Begging does nothing for me. But your acknowledgement of guilt is more than we ever received from the Lannisters or the Baratheons. When the realm turned on House Targaryen, Dorne lost everything. My father believed for a time that Viserys or Daenerys might restore our honor. But Viserys was a cruel fool, and Daenerys remained across the sea for years. We labored under false kings until Oberyn died seeking a vengeance that never came. Now you say you can offer us a place in shaping the future. Very well. I am not so blind as to reject it outright. But know this, we will not kneel to empty words. Show us you respect Dorne's sovereignty. Show us your loyalty to Elia's memory. Rhaegar's voice came gently. Name what you wish, within reason, and I will do all I can. Qhorin exchanged a glance with Rhaena. The woman stepped forward, eyes unwavering. The Water Gardens were Elia's favorite place, as you well know. Let us hold a ceremony there in her honor. Let us hear you speak of her as your wife, and let the realm know you regret the events that led to her death. If your words ring true, we might be ready to accept a new alliance. Rhaegar's throat constricted. In all the hustle of war, he had not truly confronted this piece of his past so openly. But he knew that if he wanted Dorne's trust, sincerity was the only path. I will do it, he said a bit unsteadily. Qhorin inclined his head in acceptance. Then you and your retinue are my guests. We will provide quarters in the Tower of the Sun. Tomorrow, at dusk, we shall gather by the fountains where Elia once walked. So it was settled. The day passed in a subdued haze of formalities. Rhaegar and Davos were led to private chambers, while the knights and Unsullied were accommodated nearby. Rhaegar walked the palace corridors in a kind of trance, memories drifting in and out of his consciousness. He recalled the warmth of Elia's hands when they were first wed, the floral perfume she wore on their wedding night. He remembered how she smiled at Rhaenys, a mother's tender devotion. Now, all gone, stolen away by brutality and war. He found himself pausing at a narrow colonnade that overlooked the sea. The setting sun cast the water in bronze light, and he asked himself if he had any right to stand there, resurrected in a world that had lost so many more deserving souls. At night he couldn't sleep. He paced the candlelit chamber, occasionally glancing at the bed prepared for him. Finally, he sank onto a stool near the window, letting the night air wash over him. A faint breeze carried the scent of lemons from the orchard. He tried to think of the words he would speak at Elias' memorial. Would it even matter? Or would the Dornish see it as too little, too late? Yet he had to try. For her memory, for the children, for the realm that needed healing. When morning came, he practiced with his sword to clear his mind. A few Dornish guards watched from a distance, measuring him. He didn't bother with flame or any invocation of the Lord of Light. He only performed the old routines he'd known as a young knight, the flow of muscle and breath. He was older in spirit than in body now, but the discipline steadied him. Davos appeared after a while, glancing around. All quiet, no sign of trouble. The Dornish are polite, though about as warm as an iron wall. You sure you're ready for tonight? Rhaegar wiped sweat from his brow. Ready as I'll ever be. It's not a question of readiness, but of honesty. I'll speak the truth, and hope they believe it. Davos nodded in sympathy. I've lost people too. Sometimes speaking about it helps. Sometimes it just tears the wound wider. But the realm needs this. So does Dorne, so do you. At dusk, the palace corridors glowed with torchlight. The water gardens spread out under a sky stained pink and orange. Fountains trickled into pools, and stone pathways meandered among the greenery. A hush had fallen, and Rhaegar could see hundreds of lanterns carefully placed around the perimeter. The palace staff, or perhaps the Dornish nobles, had arranged a solemn gathering. Nobles from across Dorne filled the arcades, along with common folk who had been granted special entry. They wore flowing robes in shades of gold, orange, and red, as though the setting sun itself had come to witness. In the center of the largest courtyard, near a round pool ringed by tiled mosaics, stood Prince Corran, Lady Rhaena, and others of House Martell. A single carved bench stood facing them. As Rhaegar approached, the hum of conversation died away. Torch flames flickered in the desert breeze. He stopped near the bench, heart pounding. No one spoke for a moment, letting the quiet intensify. Finally, Corran gestured for Rhaegar to address the crowd. Rhaegar's throat felt dry. He drew a steadying breath. People of Dorne, I stand before you humbled. I come in the name of peace, and in memory of Elia Martell, who was my wife and the mother of my children. Many of you knew her kindness, her grace. I failed her. Through my actions, I set events into motion that led to her death. I believed I could protect her when I left her in King's Landing, but war cares nothing for promises. Tywin Lannister's men committed unspeakable crimes, and I was not there to stop them. For that, I bear a guilt that will never leave me. Now, a ripple passed through the crowd, subdued, but Rhaegar saw some people nod. Others glowered. He continued. Elia deserved better than me, a man caught in prophecy and illusions. She deserved a life of peace in the land she loved, a chance to raise our children without fear. That was stolen from her, from all of you, by a war of claims and revenge. Now I stand here, granted a second life for reasons I barely comprehend. Perhaps it is to right old wrongs. I cannot resurrect Elia or our children, but I can pledge to honor her memory. I can pledge to stand with Dorne, to ensure the tragedies of the past are never repeated. No, He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. In the silence, only the water's soft lapping and the crackle of torch flames persisted. Then Rhaegar sank to one knee, and the Dornish watchers leaned in with bated breath. I beg you to let me do what I can to rebuild the bond between Dorne and House Targaryen. Let us walk forward together into a new peace. Let us keep Elia's memory alive by ending the cycle of hatred that claimed her. Nini our way. There it was, laid bare. He could feel his pulse hammering in his ears. Corin stepped forward, face unreadable. Lady Rhaegar approached as well, her dark eyes glittering. The hush deepened. After what felt like an eternity, Corin extended a hand and helped Rhaegar rise. "Your words are honest," he said, his tone measured. "Time will tell if your deeds match them. But for now, I, Prince Corin Martell, accept your remorse for Elias' fate. Dorne's loyalty may yet be earned by House Targaryen if you prove worthy." "Now, Carl." A subdued murmur went through the gathering. Then Lady Rhaegar produced a small hammered gold medallion etched with a sun and spear emblem. She pressed it into Rhaegar's hand. "This was Ilias. She left it behind when she married into your house. Wear it, or keep it, as a token of what you must protect. If ever you fail to uphold your vow to Dorne, we will remember that you hold this piece of her." Rhaegar's throat tightened as he closed his fingers around the medallion. The metal was warm from the heat of Rhaegar's hand, and it felt heavier than gold had any right to be. "I accept it. I'll guard it with my life." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then spreading. Not all faces seemed joyful, but Rhaegar sensed a shift, a cautious acceptance of possibility. Corin gestured for a servant to bring forth a tray of wine. Glass cups were distributed, and the Dornish parted to allow Rhaegar and the Martells to stand together at the edge of the pool, under the lanterns. Together, they drank a toast to Elia, to the memory of Oberyn, to Dorne's resilience. It was not a festival, more a quiet vigil. Yet it felt profound, a moment of bridged differences. As the crowd dispersed, many approached Rhaegar to bow, or at least nod a greeting, acknowledging him on Dornish soil for the first time since the war. Davos, who had watched from the side, exhaled in relief as he joined Rhaegar. "I'd say that went about as well as we could have hoped, my lord." Rhaegar gave a shaky smile, clutching Ilias' medallion. "It's a beginning." Over the next days, Prince Corin hosted Rhaegar and his retinue in Sunspear. They negotiated terms. Dorne would maintain certain freedoms, no heavy taxes, the right to keep its own rulership structure, a promise that a Martell would sit on the Queen's Council. In return, they would recognize Daenerys' claim and provide men if the realm faced another threat. Corin pressed for more significant reparations for damage done in the past, but Rhaegar explained that the treasury was not yet brimming with gold. They settled on the promise of future shipments of grain and supplies when the harvest season arrived, along with guarantees of seats at future councils that would determine the realm's laws. Each conversation was a test of diplomacy, but Rhaegar discovered he had a knack for listening, for acknowledging Dorne's pains and offering practical paths forward. He had been trained in rhetoric as a prince, but now humility guided him more than princely pride. Corin, for his part, tempered his initial fierceness with reason. Dorne was proud, but it had felt the sting of isolation. A realm at peace, with Dorne recognized as an equal partner, was enticing. By the time the parchments were drafted and sealed, Rhaegar sensed that a real bond was forming. Late one afternoon, he strolled alone through the water gardens, the air shimmering with heat. Vibrant blossoms trailed over marble pillars, and peacocks strutted by a reflecting pool. He let his fingers drift through the water, remembering times he had walked with Elia, listening to her laughter. The sorrow still ached, but at least now he felt he had done something to honor her. He was so lost in thought that he nearly didn't notice the woman who approached. Lady Rhaegar Dace. She stepped quietly, the train of her orange robe skimming the stone path. Rhaegar offered a courteous bow. "My lady." She inclined her head. "Prince Rhaegar, you are deep in thought." "I was remembering her. Elia." She took solace in these gardens when court life overwhelmed her. Rhaegar's features softened. "Yes, she did. I was young, but I remember how she always made time for me, for anyone who needed a listening ear. She was gentle, yet strong in her own way. I was deeply fond of her." "Gunning." Rhaegar nodded, feeling that familiar tug of regret. "She deserved a fuller life. I'm sorry that it ended the way it did." For a moment, Rhaegar looked as if she might say something harsh. Then she sighed, letting her gaze wander to the gently rippling pool. "I've hated House Targaryen for so long that it became part of me. I told myself that if any Targaryen stepped foot in Dorne again, I'd spit on their shadow. But you're not the man I expected. Perhaps you truly regret what happened." "I do, beyond measure." She studied him, Then may your second life be better than your first, for the realm's sake. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Rhaegar alone with the hush of water and wind. That evening, a messenger from King's Landing arrived with news. Rhaegar was in the palace's receiving chamber with Davos when the messenger, a lean man in dust-stained clothing, was shown in. He bowed quickly and extended a sealed scroll. "From the Queen, Your Highness." Rhaegar broke the seal. His eyes skimmed the letter. A flicker of tension crossed his face. "Cersei Lannister has retreated to Casterly Rock. She's gathering what remains of the Lannister forces. They fear she's attempting to muster enough men to launch a rebellion. Daenerys and Jon are uncertain how strong her position might be." He handed the scroll to Davos. The old knight frowned. "I suspected as much. Cersei's not the type to sit quietly. The letter says the crown is short on funds, the city's still reeling. If Cersei secures gold from the Westerlands, she might hire new sellswords. The Queen and Jon want you to remain in Dorne for now, to keep an eye on any alliances Cersei might try to form in secret. And they also wonder if you can persuade Dorne to commit troops if it comes to war again." "No cool call." Rhaegar's shoulders tightened. "War. After everything, do we face another war so soon?" He shook his head, a bitter sense of irony filling him. "I'll speak to Corran, see if he's willing to pledge some spears if we're threatened, but I'd hope to avoid further bloodshed." Davos shrugged wearily. "Sometimes trouble comes whether we want it or not. Better we be prepared." In the days that followed, Rhaegar continued to strengthen his rapport with the Dornish court. Corran invited him on hunts in the desert outskirts. He accepted, though the sun nearly baked him, and he marveled at the resilience of the Dornish riders who guided them through rock-strewn hills. Over evening feasts, the conversation often turned to Cersei Lannister. "She might attempt to bribe the lords of the Reach or the Stormlands," Corran mused one night. "But your alliances there seem strong. Or she might send envoys to Essos. The Lannisters once had deep pockets after all." Rhaegar twirled a cup of spicy Dornish wine, grimacing slightly at its bite. "I pray she sees reason. Another open conflict will tear the realm further. We're barely recovering from the dead." Corran's expression was grave. "She might see reason if reason suits her, but if she sees a chance to reclaim power, I doubt she'll hesitate. We Dornish know the Lannisters well. Tywin's cunning shaped them all. Their pride is a pit with no bottom." Nevertheless, life in Sunspear had moments of hope. The Dornish looked more kindly on Rhaegar each passing day, remarking on his willingness to walk among the common folk, to speak gently to farmers and fisherfolk. Lady Rhaenyra quietly helped him navigate delicate local customs, preventing unintentional slights. Sir Davos found a friend in the local harbor master, discussing ship designs and trade routes. Even the unsullied stoic as ever garnered respect for their discipline and courtesy. After several weeks, a fresh letter arrived from King's Landing. This time, it was from Daenerys' hand, Tyrion Lannister, inviting Rhaegar to a grand council in the capital. The letter explained that Daenerys and Jon had taken steps to improve conditions for the small folk, and that the city was growing calmer. But Cersei's movements in the Westerlands demanded a strong, unified response from the Crown's supporters. The council was set to include lords from the Reach, the Stormlands, the North, the Vale, and possibly Iron Islands. Dorne, too, was requested to send a representative, and if Rhaegar had already secured Prince Corran's cooperation, it would be valuable for them to attend together and show a united front. Rhaegar discussed this with Corran in the palace solar. Sunlight filtered through arched windows, illuminating the mosaic floor. "The Queen asks us both to come," Rhaegar said, handing Corran the parchment. "She wants an open council to address the realm's future, and the threat of Cersei's new rebellion." Corran read it, his expression pensive. "You've made progress with me, Prince Rhaegar, but I'm still not entirely sure I trust the Iron Throne. This council, if I attend, it will be seen as a formal acceptance of Queen Daenerys' rule. That's precisely what she hopes. But you'll be free to speak your mind. The Queen wants peace, not subservience. Believe me, she's no mad king. She believes in forging a better world." "Manadi." Corran rose from his seat and paced near the window, arms folded. "Dorne has always valued its independence. We joined the Seven Kingdoms in name, but in spirit we keep our own ways. If I bow too quickly, my own lords might resent it." Rhaegar nodded. Then don't bow. Walk in as equals. You are a prince of Dorne. The queen respects that. In truth, if we do not stand together now, Cersei will exploit any crack. She might try to lure Dorne away or pit us against each other. Better we present a united front on our own terms. Qhorin blew out a breath. You speak wisely. Very well. I will go. Let House Martell witness this new Targaryen court and see if your sister is as fair as you claim. They departed Sunspear a week later, traveling by land to show Qhorin's solidarity in moving north under Martell banners. Rhaegar and Davos rode side by side with Qhorin and his chosen guard. Lady Rhaenyra led a separate contingent. The blazing sun of Dorne gave way to cooler breezes as they moved beyond the Prince's Pass into the storm-lashed region near the Dornish marches. Everywhere they went, local lords emerged to greet Qhorin, bowed to him, and cast curious or wary glances at Rhaegar. Some recognized the silver hair and Targaryen bearing, recalling old tales. Rhaegar consistently responded with courtesy, discussing the alliance Daenerys sought. And in small measure, he could see how the presence of Martell and Targaryen together eased old fears or resentments, planting seeds of acceptance. The journey took many days, crossing the narrow passes, skirting the Red Mountains, then descending toward the lush fields of the Stormlands. Gendry Baratheon, newly minted Lord of Storm's End, sent outriders to greet them, offering hospitality at the fortress for a night. Rhaegar accepted, seeing another chance to strengthen ties. Storm's End's massive drum tower and thick walls dominated the horizon when they arrived, battered by sea winds. Gendry himself waited in the courtyard, clad in practical leather rather than lordly silks, a blacksmith's arms still thick with muscle. He bowed to Qhorin, then offered a more awkward bow to Rhaegar. Welcome, my lords. Storm's End is yours to command for the night, Gendry said, voice pitched to carry over the wind. We've prepared a feast, and I trust you'll find our mead to your liking, Prince Qhorin. Qhorin nodded, voice gruff with polite acceptance. We thank you. It's good to meet the last Baratheon so openly. Gendry shrugged with a half-smile, leading them inside. I'd be lying if I said I never pictured crossing these halls as more than a bastard. Still feels strange wearing these colors. At the feast, the high table bristled with Stormlords and Dornish lords eyeing each other across the platters. Though historically, the marches had been a site of conflict, Gendry made a point of toasting Rhaegar's vow to unify the realm. He gave a short speech praising the Targaryens' role in defeating the dead. Rhaegar, in return, thanked House Baratheon for setting aside the hatreds of the past. Qhorin, more reserved, merely sipped his wine and inclined his head. However, as the night wore on, Gendry's hearty mead loosened tongues. Some Stormlords began asking Qhorin about Dornish traditions, while Dornish knights inquired about the storms that battered this fortress. A cautious camaraderie formed. Davos, seated lower on the table, grinned quietly as he observed. Never thought I'd see Storm's End hosting a peaceful meeting between Martell and Targaryen, he muttered to Rhaegar when they had a moment. Times are changing indeed. Yes, Rhaegar agreed, sampling the mead with mild curiosity. Let's hope for the better. They departed Storm's End the next morning amid swirling sea mist continuing north. As they approached the Blackwater River region, the evidence of war's aftermath surfaced more visibly. Villages showed signs of damage half rebuilt. Fields had been scorched by dragonfire or destroyed by armies. Yet they also saw work crews carting lumber and stone, peasants laboring to restore what had been lost. The small folk would pause to watch Qhorin's banners pass by, then exclaim when they recognized Targaryen sigils as well. Some even cheered, glad to see a Martell traveling in open alliance with the crown. At night, Rhaegar would lie awake, pondering whether that hope could take root deeply enough to outlast Cersei's machinations. At last, they reached the outskirts of King's Landing, where Daenerys banners fluttered from tall watchtowers. Lines of tents spread outside the city walls, a sign that the city was hosting many visitors for the impending council. Soldiers from multiple regions mingled, each wearing distinct crests. The gates stood open, though guards in Targaryen livery carefully monitored traffic. As Qhorin, Rhaegar, and their parties rode into the city proper, crowds gathered to stare. Whispers darted through the throng. Prince Rhaegar, he's real, He looks just like the stories. While some faces reflected awe, others held caution, or even a flicker of old resentment. But no one hurled insults or stones. Instead, a subdued curiosity prevailed. They proceeded to the Red Keep, climbing the winding streets. The keep's gates opened, revealing a courtyard bustling with activity. Royal guards stood at attention, and Daenerys herself emerged to greet them, flanked by Jon Snow, Tyrion Lannister, Melisandre, and Grey Worm. She wore a gown of deep red, trimmed with black, her silver hair braided back. Jon at her side wore muted northern leathers, his gaze direct and calm. Tyrion offered a courteous bow to Corin, though Rhaegar noticed a tension in the dwarf's eyes as he recognized the presence of so many Dornish lords, memories of Oberyn, perhaps, or the enmity with House Martell that had festered under the Lannisters. Daenerys stepped forward, extending her hand in greeting to Corin. "Prince Corin, welcome to King's Landing. You honor us with your presence." Corin dipped his head. "Queen Daenerys, let us see if your throne is worthy of the name." Daenerys smiled at the mild challenge. "I hope to prove it. The council is convening in 2 days, to give all lords time to arrive. Until then, my servants will attend to you. I trust Prince Rhaegar has spoken of your negotiations." "He has. And I come in good faith to discuss how Dorne might stand with the Iron Throne." He glanced around, taking in the new Targaryen banners overhead, the dragon sigils newly painted. "Much has changed since last we had a Lannister upon this seat." Tyrion stepped forward. "For the better, I'd wager. Allow me to show you to your quarters, Prince Corin. We've prepared the Tower of the Hand for your retinue." As Corin and his entourage moved to follow Tyrion, Daenerys caught Rhaegar's eye. A warmth flitted across her face, relief that he had returned safely. She inclined her head subtly, then gestured for him to walk with her and Jon. They led him into the keep, away from the bustling courtyard. Once inside a quieter corridor, Daenerys let out a soft laugh and clasped Rhaegar's hands. "You did it," she murmured, eyes bright. "You brought Dorne to our gates without bloodshed." He squeezed her hands in return. "So far, yes. There's still work to do, but Corin seems willing to negotiate. If he's here, it means Dorne might truly join us." Jon's voice was low, tinged with respect. "That's good news. We'll need them, especially if Cersei moves." "You did well, father." He caught himself, as though still unaccustomed to that word, then cleared his throat. "I meant Rhaegar." The slip made Rhaegar's heart tighten with an odd mixture of pride and sorrow. He placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "I'm content with either name." Daenerys nodded, ushering them into a side room. "Come, we can speak more freely here." The room was a small council chamber with tall windows that overlooked the city. Melisandre and Grey Worm remained outside, ensuring privacy. Once the door closed, Daenerys turned, her features more serious. "Cersei is gathering troops. The Westerlands are not as rich as they once were, but it seems she's found a new gold mine in the hills near Lannisport. Tyrion's informants say she's funneling gold into hidden coffers, likely to buy mercenaries from Essos. We must act swiftly, or risk a new war. The question is whether we negotiate or strike first." Jon's brow furrowed. "We can't let her gather an army large enough to challenge the realm. On the other hand, if we attack Casterly Rock directly, it might drive uncertain lords to her side. They'll claim we're tyrants." "In line." Rhaegar placed a hand against the windowsill, looking at the city below. "What if we call upon the lords of the Westerlands to turn against her, to see that the Targaryen monarchy offers them better terms? If we can convince them to abandon Cersei, she loses power without a single battle." Daenerys' lips curved in a thoughtful smile. "That is Tyrion's plan as well. He has begun sending emissaries to houses that once served the Lannisters but felt betrayed by Cersei's policies. Our name might sway some, especially if they fear dragons. But the Lannisters have a powerful hold on that region, centuries old. We must be prepared for her refusal." Rhaegar looked at Jon, recalling how the young man had once brokered alliances with wildlings and with southern lords alike. "You have a knack for convincing those who initially distrust you. Perhaps you could speak to them. They might see you as more neutral. You are half Stark after all, and only recently revealed to be Targaryen. They may not have the same deep-seated fear of you that they do of me or Daenerys. Jon nodded slowly. I'll do what I can. We have to try reason before war. Too many battles have been fought on this soil. Oh. Daenerys approached Rhaegar, resting a hand on his forearm. But first we have this grand council. All the lords who stand with us, or might stand with us, will be there. We'll show a united realm, one that can weather any move by Cersei. Will you stand at my side, brother? His eyes warmed. I will. The next 2 days were a flurry of arrivals and preparations. The Vale's young Lord Robert Arryn had sent a representative as he was not in good health. The North was represented by several Stark bannermen, with Sansa Stark presiding on their behalf, while Arya lurked unobtrusively in the background. The Riverlands' new lord, Edmure Tully, arrived with measured humility, anxious to rebuild after so many wars. The Iron Islands were a question mark. Yara Greyjoy had pledged support to Daenerys before, but her hold on the Isles was tenuous. Eventually, a lean, scarred captain arrived bearing Yara's sigil, announcing her continued alliance. The Stormlands were present through Gendry, and the Reach had lords who'd bent the knee to Daenerys after the final battles, albeit warily. On the morning of the council, the throne room bustled with tension and anticipation. Daenerys sat upon the Iron Throne, but the dais had been widened to place seats beside her for key figures, emphasizing a collaborative rule rather than a solitary monarch. Tyrion stood to her right, ready to conduct the session, while Jon, Rhaegar, and Qhorin occupied seats at her left. The lords arrayed themselves in a semicircle before them, each with their retainers. Banners draped the stone columns, representing the houses present. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the hushed air. Tyrion struck his staff against the floor. Lords and ladies, we gather today under the reign of Queen Daenerys Targaryen, the first of her name, Breaker of Chains, to discuss the future of the Seven Kingdoms. We welcome Prince Qhorin Martell of Dorne to King's Landing, along with all of you who have come in good faith. A murmur of acknowledgement ran through the assembly. Tyrion continued, we face a threat from Cersei Lannister, who has retreated to the Westerlands and seeks to raise an army to challenge the crown. We also face the pressing need to rebuild our lands after years of war and the ravages of the Long Night. Let us hear from her grace. Daenerys stood, her presence commanding. Lords and ladies, we have survived the nightmare of the dead, thanks to our unity. I will not see that unity squandered because of one woman's lust for power. I offer an open hand to any house in the Westerlands who rejects Cersei's call. I offer new trade opportunities, relief from heavy taxes, and a voice at court. We need not fight another war if they see reason. But if they will not, I will defend the realm from any threat to our hard-won peace. Wow. She glanced at Rhaegar, who rose and addressed the gathering. I am Rhaegar Targaryen. Many of you know the legends of my death, yet here I stand. I fought alongside you at Winterfell against the dead, and I have pledged my second life to forging a realm at peace. The ghosts of the past weigh on us all, but we must not repeat the cycle of endless revenge. Let us reach out to the Westerlands. Let us show them a Targaryen rule that is fair, not tyrannical. If they spurn us, then we stand firm, united, prepared to defend the kingdom. Naik. Qhorin rose next, inclining his head to Daenerys and Rhaegar. Dorne has long memories, and we have known Targaryen rule that was both good and ill. But I have looked into the eyes of this new queen, and my mind tells me we should give her a chance. Dorne stands with the crown, should war come. But we prefer peace, just as we prefer to keep our pride and autonomy. We do this not out of fear but out of choice, believing that stability benefits us all. At that, a wash of murmurs rippled through the hall. Some lords exchanged relieved looks, for Dorne's support was significant. Others seemed apprehensive, perhaps worried about the resurgence of Targaryen power, buttressed by the Dornish alliance. Tyrion opened the floor for comment, and lords stood one by one, praising or questioning the crown's strategy. Edmure Tully expressed gratitude for the realm's direction, though he worried about resources for rebuilding his lands. Gendry pledged the Stormlands, receiving nods from many. Representatives from the Vale assured that Lord Arryn wished to avoid more bloodshed. The Iron Islands envoy stated that Yara Greyjoy supported Daenerys' offer of peace. Eventually, the question turned to the Westerlands. Tyrion explained the crown's plan to send envoys, possibly led by Jon Snow, to treat with the lesser houses who might be convinced to switch allegiance. Should these envoys fail, Tyrion said, we must consider a potential campaign to contain Cersei's forces. But we do not launch that campaign lightly. Neon. Fine. Sansa Stark, representing the North, rose. The North is weary of war, but we will stand with the crown. We cannot let Cersei plunge us into further chaos. Still, I urge caution. Many have died already. Our banners are not as full as they once were. Jon inclined his head, supporting Sansa's words. Agreed. Let the first step be diplomacy. Daenerys motioned for the lords to settle. Then we are agreed. We will send envoys to the Westerlands. If Cersei refuses to stand down, we will respond. Now let us speak of the realm's continued recovery. Food, infrastructure, the plight of the small folk who have endured so much. No. For another hour, the council discussed roads, harvests, and the distribution of resources. Rhaegar found himself at times drifting into reflection. The scene before him, lords from every corner actually collaborating, was the very hope that had driven him years ago, twisted and lost in the madness of war. Now resurrected, he was seeing it come to pass in a new shape, guided by Daenerys' inclusive style and Jon's plain honesty. The path was far from smooth, but the possibility was real. When the council adjourned, the lords departed in clusters, their retinues trailing behind. Qhorin lingered to speak privately with Daenerys and Tyrion, discussing further details for a Dornish seat on the royal council. Rhaegar withdrew to a nearby windowed alcove, gazing down upon the city. He heard footsteps approach and turned to see Jon, hands clasped behind his back. Jon nodded in quiet greeting. That was hopeful. I've never seen so many powerful men and women actually talk about building something, instead of tearing each other down. Nay, Wenaka. Rhaegar smiled faintly. War leaves little time for building. Perhaps now we can focus on it. Tell me, how are you faring? You've been in King's Landing for weeks now. It must feel strange for a man of the North. Jon's face flickered with wry amusement. The heat is stifling compared to Winterfell, but I'm managing. I've spent time in these halls before, as king in the North seeking an alliance with Daenerys. That feels like a lifetime ago. A shadow passed over him and he glanced away. Sometimes I feel I don't quite belong here, but if our presence can keep the peace, I'll stay. Rhaegar touched his arm. I suspect we both feel a bit out of place. You, a Stark raised as a bastard, discovering Targaryen blood. Me, a dead prince returned. Yet perhaps that oddness makes us stronger. We can see the realm differently than those trapped in old ways. Jon exhaled, nodding. There's truth in that. They parted on that note, each feeling the unspoken bond that had grown between them. Over the next few days, the court remained abuzz with diplomatic efforts. Jon prepared to ride west with a small retinue of envoys, carrying letters from Daenerys promising leniency and fair terms if the Westerlands bent the knee or at least declared neutrality. Tyrion hammered out the details, ensuring the letters would tempt pragmatic lords. Gendry would accompany them, hoping his Baratheon name could persuade certain families with old ties to House Baratheon. Meanwhile, Rhaegar considered his role. Daenerys suggested he remain in King's Landing to keep the morale of the realm's lords strong, to continue forging relationships among those who still had doubts. Qhorin planned to stay for a fortnight to finalize treaties between Dorne and the Crown, and Rhaegar's presence lent gravity to those discussions. Every so often, a wave of longing for quiet overcame him, the desire to simply ride away into the countryside and take a breath. But that was not his fate. Not yet. Late one evening, Rhaegar retired to his new chambers, rooms in the Red Keep once reserved for visiting royals. The walls were hung with Targaryen tapestries found in the castle vaults, now restored. A single candle flickered by his bedside as he removed his boots, stepping onto the rug with weary legs. Memory intruded, nights in this keep decades ago when his father's madness was at its peak. He recalled creeping through corridors to avoid Eris's volatile rants, practicing the harp in secret. Shaking off the thought, he sat on the bed, exhaling into the stillness. A quiet knock sounded at the door. He rose, crossing to open it. Melisandre stood there, her red robes faintly reflecting the torchlight from the corridor. He blinked, startled. He had not seen much of her since the victory at Winterfell. She had kept a low profile, letting the new monarchy find its footing. "My lady," he greeted, stepping aside so she could enter if she wished. She did, gliding over the threshold like a crimson shadow. He shut the door behind her, noticing the faint glow of the ruby at her throat. Her gaze was calm, though something in her eyes suggested urgency. "Prince Rhaegar," she said softly. "I apologize for intruding at this hour, but there is a matter that weighs on me." He motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing. Her presence stirred uneasy recollections. How she had resurrected him on Dragonstone, the warmth of Rhaegar's power coursing through his veins, the swirl of guilt over defying death. "What troubles you?" he asked, quiet. Melisandre's voice held a subdued intensity. "The Lord of Light granted you life for a purpose. You have served that purpose well, uniting the realm against the dead. But I have glimpsed something in the flames, shadows that gather at the edges of this fragile peace. Cersei is not the only threat. There are powers stirring beyond our sight across the sea, perhaps. Some who worship darkness as we worship the light. I fear that the war for the dawn might yet have echoes." Why? Rhaegar felt a chill course through him. "Are you saying there's another danger, like the White Walkers?" She shook her head slowly. "Not the same. But darkness has many forms. The truth is uncertain. The flames show me glimpses. A red door in a distant land, a golden mask, a blade that drips shadows. I cannot interpret it fully. Yet I know we must remain vigilant. The realm is not saved merely by defeating the Night King." No. Weariness pressed against Rhaegar's chest. "Then perhaps I was foolish to hope for lasting peace. Still, we must focus on the threats before us. Cersei, the rebuilding. If there are new shadows stirring, let us face them when they emerge." Melisandre nodded. "Of course. And yet, I felt compelled to warn you. The gift of life you bear, do not squander it, but do not assume it is eternal. The Lord of Light has his ways, and they are not ours to command. You have been woven into the tapestry for a reason. Use the time you have to ensure the realm stands strong." Neo-Notorak. He studied her solemn face. "I will. Thank you for your counsel." A pause. Then he asked softly, "Do you regret bringing me back?" She hesitated, a flicker in her eyes. "I regret nothing done in the name of saving the living. But the burden of resurrection is great, for both the resurrected and the one who performs it. I have doubted many things, but not your worthiness." With that, she inclined her head and slipped out into the dim corridor, leaving Rhaegar alone with the candles flickering. In the following weeks, Jon set off for the Westerlands, joined by Gendry, Sir Davos, and a small band of knights. Rhaegar remained as Daenerys' representative at court, side by side with Corin Martell. They held audiences, forging trade pacts, hearing disputes, and sending out ravens. For a time, the atmosphere seemed cautiously optimistic. The city thrummed with efforts to rebuild. Masons repaired collapsed walls, and carpenters raised new scaffolding in the poorer districts. Daenerys walked among the people on occasion, escorted by Unsullied, distributing food and listening to grievances. This was not how the monarchy had functioned in Aerys' day, and it surprised many. There was grumbling, too, from old noble families who disliked the queen's closeness to the small folk. But the city's mood lifted incrementally, shaped by hope as well as by the ever-present fear of dragons. Rhaegar found purpose in these tasks. He oversaw shipments of grain promised to Dorne, reconciling the crown's limited supplies with the need to keep the capital fed. Tyrion teased him one evening about how improbable it was to see the once poetic prince now wrestling with ledgers. Rhaegar only laughed softly, acknowledging that life had made him more practical. A few times, he visited the remnants of the old Targaryen dragon skulls in the vault beneath the Red Keep. The dark, cavernous space still smelled of dust and old bones. The skulls, once looming symbols of conquest, rested in shadows, their empty eye sockets seeming to watch him. One in particular drew his attention: the massive skull of Balerion the Black Dread. A memory pricked at him, how as a boy, he had snuck down here, trembling at the size of those jaws. Now, centuries later, his family had dragons again, but they used them to save the realm from the dead rather than to terrorize it. One twilight, as he stood in that vault, letting torchlight dance across ancient teeth, he heard a footstep. Turning, He saw Arya Stark approaching with quiet grace, a torch in one hand, her face half lit by its glow. She inclined her head, though it was not a bow, more an acknowledgement. "Prince Rhaegar," she said. "Arya, I didn't expect to find you here." He watched her carefully, recalling that she had once hidden a fierce desire to be a warrior rather than a lady. She walked closer, eyes flicking from one skull to another. "I've been exploring the castle. I like the quiet places, and these skulls, they remind me how big the world can be, how old." She paused, then met his gaze. "They say you were once good at reading people. What do you see when you look at me?" Rhaegar considered her question. "I see a girl who became a warrior, one who has seen death and refused to yield. I see a wolf with the eyes of a hawk, always watching. You've done things others wouldn't dream of. Perhaps you carry burdens heavier than many lords could guess." A ghost of a smile touched Arya's lips, but it was tinged with sadness. "You're kind. But yes, I've killed. More than once. I had a list of names, people who hurt my family, people who betrayed us. Most are dead now. For a time I thought vengeance was all I had. But the world goes on. Sansa is trying to rule. Jon is forging alliances. Daenerys is queen. Sometimes I wonder where I fit." "Nah." Rhaegar sighed softly, understanding. "Vengeance is a narrow path. I've walked it in my own way, chasing prophecy and illusions. But if you keep your eyes open, you might see other paths. Perhaps you'll find peace in forging the future rather than punishing the past." She nodded, absorbing his words. They lingered a while longer in the flickering gloom, gazing at the silent monuments of Dragonkind. The moment felt oddly comforting. Two people from different generations, each shaped by war and second chances, acknowledging the weight of the dead. When they parted, Arya left as quietly as she came, and Rhaegar climbed the steps back into the keep, pondering her unspoken longing. The next day, a raven arrived from Jon's party in the Westerlands. Tyrion read it aloud to Daenerys, Rhaegar, and Qhorin in the council room. Jon and Gendry have had some success. Several lesser houses, like House Payne, House Crakehall, House Brax, have agreed to meet with them. But the major houses, including the Lannisters of Lannisport, remain loyal to Cersei for now, whether out of fear or genuine loyalty. Cersei is said to be rallying men at Casterly Rock, fortifying it. She has yet to march on any region, but tensions rise. Daenerys frowned, tapping her fingers on the tabletop. "They'll keep negotiating, but time is short. If Cersei amasses a large enough force, she might attempt a sudden strike on the Crownlands or the Riverlands." Qhorin placed a palm on the map. "Dorne can be ready to ride north at your command." Tyrion glanced at Rhaegar. "We may not have the coin for a protracted siege, but if it comes to it, we could blockade Casterly Rock by land and sea, especially with the Iron Islands controlling the western waters." Daenerys stood. "Let us hope it doesn't come to that, but we must prepare. I will hold a war council tomorrow to plan for every contingency." She turned to Rhaegar. "In the meantime, perhaps you could send her a letter, brother. A personal plea. She's seen you in the throne room. Well, your statue, if nothing else. She must know the rumors that you live. If anything can sway her pride, maybe it's the knowledge that the Targaryen she hated is actually alive and begging her to lay down arms." "No." Rhaegar grimaced at the thought. "She once despised me as a symbol of everything her family fought against. I doubt she'd heed me, but I'll try. If she has any fraction of reason left, perhaps we can avoid another war." He spent the evening drafting the letter, choosing each word carefully. He offered clemency, recognition of Lannister titles, a promise of no reprisal for the past, if Cersei would renounce her claim to the throne and disband her forces. He reminded her of the devastation the realm had already endured. He wrote that the Targaryens did not come to annihilate the Lannisters, only to restore peace. Sealing it with a Targaryen signet, he dispatched the raven westward, uncertain if she would even read it. Days turned into a tense vigil. No reply came. Jon's letters reported cautious optimism, but no breakthrough. Word arrived that House Farman had broken with Cersei, yet House Lannister's main branch remained fiercely loyal. Daenerys continued her reform efforts in King's Landing, forging new roads, encouraging trade, and establishing a rudimentary council of advisors from various regions. Qhorin, having secured his main terms for Dorne, prepared to depart but promised to return with troops if needed. Rhaegar assisted in day-to-day governance, which sometimes involved solving petty disputes or ensuring the city watch was well organized. It was a far cry from the battlefield or the high drama of the long night, but it was crucial for stability. Melisandre's warning about dark forces lingered in his mind, though no immediate sign of such a threat appeared. The nights were peaceful enough, save for the occasional brawl in Flea Bottom or smugglers caught at the docks. Meanwhile, rumors of the resurrected prince spread across the land, weaving a new sort of legend about Rhaegar Targaryen, the man who had burned with a flaming sword, who had died and risen for the realm's salvation. At last, another raven arrived from Jon's camp near Lannisport. This one bore grim news. Tyrion read it before the gathered council. Jon and Gendry warn that Cersei's forces are no longer idle. They've begun marching east, possibly to secure the Gold Road or to threaten the Riverlands. Rumors say Cersei aims to strike River Run or even make a push toward King's Landing. She's counting on us being hesitant to burn more castles with dragons due to our promises of mercy. Jon advises that we must respond sooner. A stir of alarm swept the council. Daenerys stood, fists clenched. I will not let her lay waste to the Riverlands. We marched through enough scorched fields. If she's drawn her sword, then we have no choice. Nah. Gendry, who had returned from the negotiations, nodded in agreement. We tried reason, but she's chosen war. Sansa, present for the council, said firmly. We in the north will send more men, though our numbers are not large. We can at least hold the neck against any approach from that direction. Rhaegar exhaled, a heaviness clamping down on his chest. So it comes to this again. I fear the realm has no more appetite for war, but Cersei forces our hand. Daenerys turned to Grey Worm. Gather the Unsullied and the Dothraki. We'll march out within the week. We can meet her in the field if she crosses the Blackwater. I refuse to let her pick us apart. Tyrion pinched the bridge of his nose. We must do this carefully. The small folk can't endure another siege on King's Landing, especially with winter still lingering in parts of the continent. If we meet her in open battle, the city might remain safe. But if we lose, it's a disaster. Daenerys' eyes flashed. We will not lose. The only reason we haven't used the dragons already is because we wanted to avoid carnage. But if she marches an army toward the capital, I'll unleash fire if I must. Enough of her madness. She threatened this city once with wildfire. She'll do it again if given the chance. Now, the plan took shape swiftly, born of necessity. Daenerys, Rhaegar, and the bulk of their forces would move west to intercept Cersei's army before it could strike the Riverlands or approach the Crownlands. Jon and Gendry would harry Cersei's flanks from the north with the men who had joined them. Sansa would remain in King's Landing to oversee supply lines, supported by Tyrion. Qhoren offered a contingent of Dornish spears as well, though the full might of Dorne wouldn't arrive in time for the initial engagement. Within days, the city was again full of the bustle of war preparation. Soldiers mustered at the gates. Daenerys Dothraki, who had returned from scattered postings, assembled with savage enthusiasm. The Unsullied formed ranks in the outer wards. Blacksmiths hammered day and night to supply swords and spears. Rhaegar felt a cold knot in his stomach. This was exactly what he'd hoped to avoid. But hope meant little when faced with a Lannister's unyielding ambition. Then the day came when Daenerys and Rhaegar mounted their dragons once more, taking flight over the city with the midday sun glinting on scales. Drogon and Rhaegal roared, sending tremors of excitement and fear through onlookers. Below, columns of infantry marched out, banners snapping. It was a scene reminiscent of Daenerys' earlier campaigns, though now it felt more solemn, as if the realm itself was exhausted but determined. They flew west, the wind lashing at them. Rhaegal beneath Rhaegar's saddle still remembered the wounds from the long night, but he flew strong. Rhaegar struggled with the swirl of emotions. He had once died leading an army for a dream that turned nightmarish. Now, he led again, trying to preserve a fragile unity. He cast a glance at Daenerys astride Drogon, her figure outlined against the brilliant sky. She was a queen grown, wise and fierce, shaped by her trials in Essos and Westeros alike. The city fell away behind them, replaced by rolling plains and distant forests. They made camp along the Gold Road. Their forces spread out across a series of low hills, forming a rough perimeter. Scouts brought news that Cersei's army was marching not far ahead, occupying a defensive position near a crossing of the Wendwater, a tributary that flowed through farmland. Maps were unfurled in a command tent, where Daenerys, Rhaegar, Grey Worm, and various commanders debated strategy. The Dothraki wanted an immediate charge, but Daenerys urged caution. Their aim was to break Cersei's resolve, not raise half the countryside. Rhaegar proposed a flanking maneuver with dragons, forcing Cersei to either break ranks or retreat. If possible, they'd let Jon's contingent come in from the northwest, creating a pincer that might end the conflict quickly. Night fell, but no one slept deeply. The tension of impending battle gnawed at them. Rhaegar lay on a bedroll in his tent, recalling the final hours before the Battle of the Trident so many years ago. He remembered the hammer's crash, the water's roar, the final flash of agony. Now he had a second chance. Perhaps this time, he could be the difference between endless war and a swift resolution. At dawn, trumpets sounded. Word came that scouts sighted Cersei's vanguard moving into position on a low ridge near the river. Daenerys donned her leather battle attire. Rhaegar strapped on black armor bearing the three-headed dragon crest. Outside, the Dothraki mounted their horses. The Unsullied formed disciplined blocks, and Westerosi knights loyal to Daenerys waited under their own banners. The air was crisp, the ground damp with morning dew. Rhaegar felt Rhaegal's heartbeat, strong and steady beneath him as he climbed into the saddle. Drums pounded. Daenerys and Rhaegar rose into the sky, scouting the Lannister lines. Below, thousands of men formed ranks, red and gold lion banners fluttering. Rhaegar's keen eyes picked out heavy crossbow emplacements, likely scorpions designed to shoot bolts at dragons, reminiscent of Qyburn's old weapons. Siege towers had been repurposed for ballista platforms. Clearly, Cersei had prepared for the possibility of dragonfire. Daenerys signaled with a horn blast, and the allied forces began to advance. The Dothraki whooped and spurred their horses, while the Unsullied kept step. Rhaegar circled overhead, scanning for any sign of weakness. Then he saw a parting in the enemy lines. An armored figure rode forward. Jaime Lannister? No, Jaime was rumored to have died at the sack of King's Landing. This must be someone else. Through the swirling dust, Rhaegar couldn't quite see who led them. But the Lannister forces did not charge. They formed a defensive crescent around their crossbows. Daenerys circled from the other side with Drogon, unleashing a roar to test the Lannisters' nerve. A few lines wavered, but the crossbow operators held their ground. They're waiting for us to come in range, Rhaegar thought grimly. They want to lure the dragons into a volley of bolts. He signaled to Daenerys to hold off. Instead, the Unsullied advanced, locking shields, while the Dothraki swept around the flank. Arrows flew from both sides. Men shouted. Swords glinted in the rising sun. The first clash occurred near the base of the ridge, where the Dothraki's wild cavalry charge met lines of spearmen. Horses screamed. Men died, dust and blood mingling. Overhead, the dragons roared but did not descend into the kill zone. A desperate slog began, neither side giving quarter. The Lannister forces had skill and discipline, but the allied host outnumbered them, and the Dothraki were fearsome once unleashed. Rhaegar hovered on Rhaegal, awaiting the right moment. Then a trumpet call in the distance signaled Jon's arrival. His banners appeared on the Lannister flank, causing a ripple of alarm. Precisely as they planned, Cersei's men found themselves caught between two forces. Sensing the shift, Daenerys spurred Drogon downward, unleashing a blast of dragonfire at a scorpion emplacement. The weapon erupted in flame, scattering the crew. Rhaegar followed suit, striking another siege engine. Crossbow bolts hissed upward, some missing by yards, others scraping scales. Rhaegal roared in pain at a glancing strike but pressed on, spitting greenish flame that consumed a row of Lannister archers. On the ground, Jon led a wedge of knights into the Lannister flank, smashing through a line of foot soldiers. Gendry, forging forward with a warhammer reminiscent of Robert Baratheon's, broke shields and scattered men. The tide turned quickly under the hammer and anvil approach. The Lannisters, seeing dragons overhead and multiple fronts, began to lose cohesion. Rhaegar soared lower to get a better view. He saw a desperate pocket of resistance near the center, where a group of Lannister bannermen rallied around a crimson banner bearing a golden lion. Before them stood a tall figure in ornate armor. Through the swirl of dust, Rhaegar recognized the pale blonde hair and regal bearing. Cersei Lannister herself? Had she truly come to the field in armor? She pointed an ornate spear at a scorpion operator, barking orders. The ballista swiveled toward Drogon, loosing a thick bolt that whistled past Daenerys. Drogon roared, answering with a torrent of flame that consumed the scorpion. Cersei reeled back, shielded by a ring of knights, but Rhaegar could see she was dangerously close to the front lines. Cersei's presence here was a gamble. If she won, her legend would be unstoppable. If she lost, it was the end. Rhaegar realized that if he could force her surrender, the war might end instantly. Without their queen, the Lannister forces would collapse. He urged Rhaegal into a dive, trying to land near enough to demand her submission. Bolts soared up, forcing him to bank sharply. Fire washed across the ridge as Daenerys incinerated more siege engines. On the ground, the Dothraki closed in, cutting down swaths of Lannister infantry. Jon's knights pressed in from the west, the Unsullied advanced from the east. The Lannister lines buckled. Soon it was chaos, men casting down arms, others fighting to the last. Rhaegar spotted Cersei's banner edging back, a retreat forming. He spurred Rhaegal forward, unleashing a burst of flame to create a corridor of intimidation. Some Lannister soldiers fled in terror. Finally he saw her, Cersei, dismounted, staggering across blood-soaked ground, a few loyal knights forming a protective circle. Her face was twisted with fury, hair caked in sweat. She brandished a short sword, though it was more symbolic defiance than real threat against a dragon overhead. Rhaegar let Rhaegal land heavily, shaking the earth. Soldiers scattered, fearful. He leapt from the saddle, brandishing his own sword. "Cersei Lannister!" he shouted, voice carrying over the din. "Yield. This battle is lost. Spare your men more death." She turned, eyes blazing with hatred. Blood streaked her cheek. A knight lunged at Rhaegar, but he dodged aside and parried with a clang of steel. Rhaegal roared, flicking his tail and sending the knight sprawling. Another knight tried to thrust a spear at Rhaegar, but the prince disarmed him with a swift strike. A savage grin cut across Cersei's face. "You're the ghost the realm whispers of, Rhaegar Targaryen, back from the dead to plague us all. I killed your father's line once, I'll do it again." She advanced with her sword raised, eyes gleaming in near madness. "My father took your father's city, your sister took my throne, the Lannisters do not yield." Rhaegar's heart pounded. The Lannisters are defeated. Look around you. Your men are dead or routing. You have no chance. End it now. Surrender, and Daenerys might spare you. "Now it's times." Cersei spat, lunging. She was skilled enough to be dangerous, though not a match for a trained knight. Rhaegar deflected her blow, stepping aside. He didn't want to kill her. If she died, the Lannisters would be broken, yes, but a living prisoner might unify the realm more cleanly. He parried another thrust and seized her sword arm, twisting it so the weapon fell from her grip. She snarled, fighting like a cornered lioness. Desperately, she reached for a dagger at her belt, but Rhaegar pinned her arm, forcing her to her knees in the mud. The stench of blood surrounded them. Around them, Lannister soldiers either lay dead or threw down arms. The clang of swords was replaced by the moans of the wounded. Drogon swooped overhead, unleashing a final roar as Daenerys signaled the end of the battle. The allied forces cheered in triumph, while the few remaining Lannisters surrendered. Cersei glared up at Rhaegar, eyes burning with fury and humiliation. "Kill me, you Targaryen bastard," she hissed. "Spare me your mercy." He drew in a ragged breath, the adrenaline making his limbs tremble. "I'm not Robert Baratheon. Nor am I Tywin Lannister. We don't butcher prisoners. You'll face justice in King's Landing. This war is done." "Nemu," she screamed in rage, thrashing, but he held her firm. Knights loyal to Daenerys rushed forward, placing shackles on Cersei, dragging her to her feet. All around them, the allied forces exhaled with relief. The sun climbed higher, illumining a field littered with bodies and scorched earth. But the battle had ended swiftly, the plan working near perfectly. Jon arrived on horseback, face streaked with dust and blood. He saw Rhaegar with Cersei in chains and let out a breath. "It's over then." Rhaegar nodded grimly. "Yes, let's see it ended fully in King's Landing." Amid the wreckage, the living gathered. Prisoners were disarmed and placed under guard, the wounded given what aid could be spared. Daenerys landed Drogon near the ridge, dismounting regally. Her eyes took in the carnage. She locked gazes with Rhaegar, then with Cersei, and a wave of conflicting emotions crossed her face. Anger, triumph, sorrow at the cost. Finally, she said in a resolute tone, "Cersei Lannister, you are my prisoner. The realm will judge your crimes." Ne Torbei. Cersei had no strength left to shout. She only gave Daenerys a look of pure loathing. Then the guards forced her away. Word spread quickly. Cersei was captured, the Lannister army defeated. Victory was Daenerys. The small folk living near the battlefield peered from their hovels, watching as the victors took stock. Jon and Gendry moved among their men, praising those who'd fought well, comforting the wounded. Daenerys and Rhaegar offered what help they could, though as dragons they had soared above the main fray. When evening came, a solemn camp was erected. Funeral pyres were prepared for the dead on both sides. Daenerys insisted the Lannisters receive the same rights as her own men, for they were still children of the realm. Fires blazed long into the night, sending sparks dancing toward the black sky. Rhaegar stood near one pyre, remembering the countless battles of his past life. He felt a burden lift from his soul. They had avoided a protracted war. Thousands might still be dead, but tens of thousands more were spared. He found Jon at the edge of the camp, gazing into the flames. For a time, neither spoke. Then Jon quietly asked, "Do you think it's finally over? The realm has lost so much." Rhaegar's voice was soft. "Yes, I do. Cersei was the last major challenger to Daenerys' rule. With her in chains, the lords of Westeros have no reason left to fight. We can move on, rebuild." Jon nodded, the firelight dancing in his gray eyes. "I hope so. I'm tired of war. The realm needs peace." Come morning, the army marched back to King's Landing with Cersei in a barred wagon. Along the way they encountered a few outposts of Lannister loyalists, but these surrendered upon hearing of Cersei's capture. The gold from the rumored new mine near Lannisport was discovered in caravans, seized by Daenerys' forces. With that gold, the crown could further fund reconstruction. They entered King's Landing in a subdued procession. Some small folk cheered, while others stood in silence, uncertain how to greet the battered soldiers. Cersei's wagon rolled through the gates, escorted by Unsullied. Daenerys and Rhaegar flew overhead, the dragon's shadows passing over the throngs. At the Red Keep, Cersei was taken below to a secure cell. Tyrion watched her pass with unreadable eyes, no words exchanged between siblings. Qyburn was nowhere to be seen. Reports suggested he died on the battlefield, or fled. The mountain had been slain by the combined might of Unsullied spears. Thus ended the last vestiges of Cersei's reign. In the throne room, Daenerys held a formal session of court. Lords from across the realm attended, crowding the hall. Cersei was brought forth in chains, her once proud features gaunt. Tyrion read out a list of charges: treason, murder, conspiracy to overthrow the rightful queen, unleashing the undead wight in King's Landing, though that had been a demonstration, it was deemed reckless, and more. Cersei remained silent, except for the occasional glare. Daenerys pronounced the sentence: execution or exile. She paused, letting the hush deepen, then said, "Yeah, I recall the horrors of my father's time. I recall how once the realm believed Targaryens to be savage tyrants. I will not repeat those sins by burning my enemies alive. Nor will I let them roam free to plot anew. Cersei Lannister, you are hereby condemned to spend the rest of your days in the Silent Sisters' custody, serving the realm in anonymity. You will wear no crown, wield no power, and speak no words. Let the realm see what becomes of those who choose war over peace." A shocked murmur rippled through the hall. The Silent Sisters were an order that served the dead, never speaking. It was a fate akin to living death. Cersei's eyes widened with horror, but she said nothing, her spirit perhaps too broken for final defiance. The crowd parted as the tall, hooded forms of two Silent Sisters approached, took Cersei by the arms, and led her away. Thus ended her ambitions, and in a sense, her life as the world knew her. A hush lingered, then a cheer broke out among many in the hall. They had expected a beheading or dragon fire. Some were pleased by the mercy, others unsettled. Tyrion closed his eyes, as though relieved not to witness his sister's blood spilled in front of him. Jon looked on with acceptance. Sansa and Arya exchanged glances. Arya's lips tightened, but she made no move. Rhaegar exhaled, feeling that this final act of clemency might be a turning point. Daenerys had shown she would punish wrongdoing, but not with the cruelty or brutality of the past. Over the next days, a sense of release settled over King's Landing. Lannister bannermen surrendered or accepted Daenerys's overlordship. The war ended with remarkable swiftness. Envoys poured in to confirm the realm's new unity. The Iron Throne was truly secured under House Targaryen, with the support of House Martell, House Stark, House Baratheon, and others. Jon returned to the north briefly to ensure stability there, but he promised to come back for further counsels. Gendry traveled to Storm's End to oversee reconstruction. Corran offered to host a future gathering in Dorne to celebrate peace, a gesture that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. Amid this swirl of diplomacy, Rhaegar quietly withdrew more often to the Red Keep's library or the private gardens. Though the realm welcomed him as a hero, though Daenerys and Jon treated him as beloved family, he felt a restlessness in his heart. Perhaps it was the knowledge that he had done what he was brought back to do, saving Westeros from the dead, uniting it under a just queen, helping in Cersei's reign without catastrophic bloodshed. Now the realm was stable, or at least as stable as it had been in decades. Where did that leave him? One late afternoon, he ventured to the Godswood. Though King's Landing's Godswood was small and unimpressive compared to Winterfell's, it still offered a patch of greenery and the quiet murmur of a pool fed by a small spring. There he found Sansa Stark seated on a bench, sunlight filtering through leaves onto her coppery hair. She rose and dipped her head in polite respect. "Prince Rhaegar." He inclined his head in return. "Lady Sansa, may I join you?" She gestured for him to sit. For a few moments they listened to the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the city. Then Sansa said, "My father once told me that your songs were beautiful, that you had a gentle heart despite the war. He fought against you, but he never called you cruel." Rhaegar smiled sadly. "Eddard Stark was an honorable man. I regret the circumstances that made us enemies." Sansa clasped her hands in her lap. "Now it's over. Jon and I can rebuild the north. You and Daenerys can lead the south. I suppose we've won, yet I still feel uneasy. So much has changed." He studied her for a moment. "Change is frightening even when it's necessary. You have witnessed horrors, losing your family, forced into captivity by the Lannisters, then by Ramsay Bolton. Now you're free, your family's avenged, the realm is at peace. You deserve rest." A small, wry smile tugged at her lips. "Rest is a luxury for those who don't have to rule, but I appreciate the sentiment. Perhaps we all need time to heal." He nodded. The air smelled of grass and late summer warmth. "Yes, healing is a process. I think the realm is ready for it." She offered him a smile, and together they fell into companionable silence, each comforted by the presence of the other's understanding. Not long afterward, Daenerys summoned him to a private balcony overlooking Blackwater Bay. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and pink, casting a glittering path across the water. She wore a simpler gown than usual, her hair loose. Rhaegar saw an unspoken question in her eyes as he approached. "My queen," he said gently. "You wish to speak?" She nodded, leaning on the stone railing. "The realm owes you a debt, brother. Twice now you've helped save it, from the dead and from Cersei's last stand. I know this second life wasn't your choice, but you've used it well. Now as we settle into peace, I wonder about your future. Do you wish to remain here as my advisor? You could take a formal seat on my council, or perhaps rule a region if you choose." "Now." Rhaegar smiled, touched by her generosity. "You honor me, but I have no desire to claim a lordship or a seat of power. My heart is too weary for the intrigues of court, and the realm is in capable hands with you and Jon. I think I may travel." Her brows rose. "Travel? Where?" He turned to gaze at the horizon, where the sea met the sky in fading light. "I've read of the Summer Isles, of the hidden wonders of Essos, of lost Valyria's ruins. Perhaps I'd like to see some piece of the world outside the shadow of war. Or simply wander Westeros, learning its corners in peace. My first life was defined by duty and conflict. This second life, I'd like to find myself, perhaps." "Nay." She placed a hand on his arm. "Will you come back?" He smiled, gently covering her hand with his. Of course, if you need me. You are my family, along with Jon. But let me walk the quiet roads for a time. Let the realm see that a Targaryen can walk among them without armies or dragons, that we are people as much as rulers. Now or wow. Daenerys looked both sad and understanding. I'll miss you. But I won't hold you here against your will. You've given so much. She paused, swallowing. You'll visit Dragonstone before you depart? He nodded. I'd like that. Dragonstone was our ancestral seat after all. It was where you began your return to Westeros, and where I was reborn. A faint smile touched his lips. I'll say a prayer there for Ellie and Lyanna, for mother and father, for all that's been lost, and for all we gained. They embraced quietly, the light of the setting sun hallowing them. Over the next days, Rhaegar made his farewells. Jon returned from the north to see him off, an affectionate clasp of arms exchanged between father and son. Tyrion offered a dry quip about how the realm might get on without a living legend, while Melisandre sincerely thanked him for his kindness. Arya and Sansa each gave him respectful parting words, acknowledging the strange path that had brought them from enemies to allies. Corin Martell bowed in gratitude for Rhaegar's role in bridging Dorne and the Crown. Even Gendry offered a firm handshake, a quiet thanks for sparing them a longer war. Finally, Rhaegar mounted Rhaegal once more, but only for a short flight to Dragonstone. He had decided not to keep the dragon at his side constantly. The realm needed dragons for security, yes, but Daenerys was mother to them. They obeyed her best. For his travels, Rhaegar would go on foot, or by ship as a simple pilgrim or wanderer. A Targaryen with no throne, no war, only the open roads. Dragonstone's dark silhouette rose from the sea as they approached. Landing in the courtyard, Rhaegar took a moment to recall how it felt the night Melisandre summoned him from death. The old gloom of the fortress had changed. Daenerys had used it as her foothold, then moved much of its garrison to King's Landing. Now it stood quiet, a caretaker staff maintaining the halls. Rhaegar walked those corridors, remembering each step that led to the chamber where he'd gasped his first breath in decades. He found it in an unused wing, the storerooms now mostly empty. Dust motes floated in the dim light. The stone slab remained, a silent testament to the impossible. He knelt beside it, placing a palm on its surface. "Thank you," he whispered, unsure if he spoke to Uriel or to fate, or to the memory of all that had happened. He felt a stir of warm air, perhaps just a draft from the sea. He closed his eyes, letting a single tear roll down his cheek, grief and gratitude intertwined. At dawn, he departed. A simple fishing boat carried him away from Dragonstone's black shores, heading east along the coast. He had only a small pack, a cloak, and the medallion of Elia Martell that Lady Rhaenyra had given him. No crown, no retinue. The fisherman at the oars was an old man who recognized him but asked no questions beyond "Where to, lord?" Rhaegar answered, "Wherever the winds take us. Let's start with the next harbor." The old man shrugged and did as asked. So began the new life of Rhaegar Targaryen, wandering soul in the land he had helped save. The realm he left behind would speak of him for generations. The prince resurrected by fire, the slayer of the Night King, the man who ended Cersei's tyranny without succumbing to vengeance. Meanwhile, Daenerys reigned from the Iron Throne with wisdom and mercy, aided by Jon, Tyrion and the many houses that had found unity at last. The scars of war would linger, but day by day, they would heal, replaced by new growth. Roads would be rebuilt, villages restored, houses reconciled. The North, Dorne, the Reach, the Stormlands, the Riverlands, the Vale, the Westerlands and the Iron Islands, each corner of the Seven Kingdoms, had a voice in the new order, guided by a queen who understood compassion and strength in equal measure. In hushed taverns and around winter hearths, small folk told tales of Rhaegar's harp, of how he once sang sad ballads that made even stones weep. Some claimed he still roamed the countryside in disguise, aiding travelers in need, or that he sailed beyond the Jade Sea, seeking lost wonders. No one knew for certain. But the memory of his role in forging peace endured, woven into the great tapestry of the realm's story. And if ever in the future, darkness rose again, whether from the far north or some distant shore, perhaps Rhaegar would appear once more, like a wandering star that crosses the sky only when night is blackest. For he was the prince who had come back from death, who had learned the cost of prophecy and the value of mercy. Westeros would remember, and if it was wise, it would hold fast to the unity he had helped create, forging onward in a world where dragons flew not to conquer, but to guard the dawn.